We're back.
Welcome.
We are back. And we are back, and I think it's the first time we got both of us on time at the start right away. So I think that's a round of applause, right? I think no audio issues right off the bat. I think we're both here, right? Like, let's double check.
That's the important thing.
Yes.
That's the important thing.
Yes.
Should we go back to our split screen layout just for the viewers so no one gets too scared?
I think so. Yeah, I think we should go back split screen there.
Ready? Okay.
There we go. There we go. Now we had a weird jump scare to the art in the background for a second, but we are live. We are back. We are here, and I'm happy to be here. What about you, Robert?
It's good. The playoffs are about to start, and honestly, I think everyone's kind of ready, including the teams, even with some games still to play today. And I think tomorrow it's time. It's time. Everyone kind of agrees it's time. All the teams are in that are going to be in. It's time. Do you want to get the producer notes before we dig into the playoffs, though?
I do think so. I think it's an important thing every time for us to get into the producer notes from week 2. And we can even go back to week 1 if needed. But I think producer notes are needed here. So,
yeah. I don't know if you had a chance to sit down with our producer and talk about all the sweet ambient noise from the broadcast last week, which really added to the vibe. I thought there's nothing like hearing pucks hitting glass and hearing people shout for a pass in the background. The ambient noise was kind of very, very ambient at different times too. I don't know if the producer liked that or not in your conversation. How did that go? Did you get chewed out or complimented?
There was I believe the producer took a hard look in the mirror and thought that there's times where it works, but there's also we shouldn't do it all the time. I think that was those were the show notes. Proper doesn't. I think a good on location for the show isn't bad. Who knows where we don't know what the schedule looks like next week anyway for the hockey world. So, I think right now the only thing that we kind of know is we can assume that at some point in an afternoon window on Saturday, the Dallas Stars will play the Minnesota Wild. So that's definitely, I think that's what we know. I think we also know that there's a couple other,
East Coast probably going to start sooner because I think it's all West Coast teams tomorrow, or Western Conference teams tomorrow, I should say. So East, as always, they'll lead with the East.
Yes, and the key is, and that's why I think that's the other reason that we kind of know that. I know Glenn Goldson has done a very poor job of hiding the secret to you guys in the media in Dallas that they're going to play on Saturday, but I think we can all put 2 and 2 together. Of you look at all the Western Conference teams that are playing on Thursday, and Minnesota and Dallas happen not to be any of them. So they are both done after tonight, so they can build towards that. So
a couple days of rest. I think most teams are pretty banged up right now. Maybe Minnesota not as much, but I think any rest any team can get right now is probably positive. Though it is an interesting question. I mean, you certainly hear some players around the league who are saying, no, we want to play. We want to keep going. We don't want to be off for like a full week, but some teams, I think Minnesota is basically sitting their entire first power play unit for the last 2 games of the season. So
Carolina's been sitting. Carolina's been sitting players for 2 weeks now, right? And it's been the Carolina one's been funny. Not that they've been doing it because I actually don't have any problem with it, Carolina. But it's been I laugh at kind of the way they've just listed them as like undisclosed or like call them injury related when we all know what's happening, right? Like it's just they're resting players, and it's
you go to like an injury report site or whatever, and it's funny because you see a really big list in a team, then you look to the right and it says injury, rest. So
and I also don't think we have. I think we have a bit of a natural like. We don't have I think Carolina is a little bit more forward thinking than a lot of teams, and more so of not necessarily to the level of that they're doing it, because we've seen other teams rest players. We saw Dallas rather famously or infamously the rest out and not play the last 5 games of the regular season last spring, right?
I think Columbus took a similar tactic this year, unfortunately.
Exactly, but Columbus had something to play for still.
Someone should have told them, I think.
Yeah, we also have there's such a hockey vibe, right? Of, hey, I want to play every game. I want to play all 82 games. And
Yeah.
I think that is something that is, for better or worse, such a defining factor of the sport. And so while we do have some kind of like some rest situations and things like that, it's not nearly the, I don't think it's fair to when we call it the equivalent to the NBA stuff. And I think the NBA stuff is twofold. Yeah. One, the NBA, you do have a bit of a rest and management kind of problem to the level of, and you and I aren't the people to speak on that, but just I know NBA writers who have. And then you also have the other thing about the NBA schedule that kind of, it's such a star-driven sport, right? Like, and while hockey is star-driven, it's outside of 4 or 5 players. I don't think there's really. I don't think outside of 4 or 5 players, I don't think there's really. Most teams aren't driving ticket sales based off whether one guy is in or not.
With
right,
maybe a guy in Washington would be the exception there.
Exactly, yeah, and like the guy in Washington, or seeing a Sidney Crosby, and maybe even a.
I mean, like, Kopitar in his farewell tour.
Yeah,
but I'm sure. But those cases are different. Yeah, I get it.
But I do think, like, for example, if you're a Stars fan and you're like, I'm gonna go see when the Kings come to town, I don't think you're trying to resell your ticket because Kopitar's out of the lineup that night, right? Yeah. Just like
good point.
I'm not going to use Luka as an example because that's a completely different animal going back to Dallas, but like say Steph Curry's not in the lineup when Golden State comes to town. That's probably going to really determine whether you actually want that ticket or not. I don't think that happens in the end. I don't think that really happens as much with the NHL. And
yeah.
For better or worse. So,
well, yeah. And it also happens at different, like, it's strategic when it's the very end of the season and you're locked up. You basically have nothing to play for. There might be a little bit of home ice still. Anaheim can still slip into the second wild card in the West, which would be crazy for how long they spent as a divisional seed and even leading the Pacific. But that's a big deal because it would mean playing Colorado in the first round. So they certainly have a lot to play for. But I think in the NBA, the way I've seen load management work the last few years is it's happening throughout the season because they have, I mean, similar to, soccer where you'll basically have your medico is going to say, no, this player's capped at 45 minutes today, or you need to, if they're going to play this position, they can only do this, or they have to come out at this point, or it depends on the temperature of the game because muscle tightness, all these, I mean, it's that, which again, they're trying to, they're assets, right? They have millions and millions of dollars or pounds or whatever invested in these players. So it makes sense that you want to try to maximize the asset and preserve it. In hockey, though, you generally only see that by and large at the end of the season because the difference in import for the games is so drastic, which, I mean, it's the case with every American sport, North American sport with playoffs, but in hockey, it's magnified just because of how important those playoff games and gate revenue are.
And it's also, the minutes thing is interesting too, right? I don't like getting into the please like my sport conversation, right? Like, I think that gets a little bit too far driven and everything like that. But there's also a level where, and I just looked it up because I was curious to see, and so like Luka Doncic averages 36 minutes per night for the Lakers, right? Like, if an individual NHL player skater was averaging 36 minutes per night per game, maybe we have that. Like, I think that's another just kind of.
Well, and maybe that's why Quinn Hughes has sat the last couple games because he put up 32 minutes or whatever against Dallas last week, and he averages almost 28 minutes a night.
Yeah. So no, it's an interesting thing to look at and how things kind of build. And I think it's worth talking about. And I think there's times where some teams probably I think there's certain things that kind of work that way and certain things that other. It is interesting because like tonight, like the games, it is with. Obviously, the Ducks have something to play for to try to figure out seeding, but it is interesting where we're at that spot of there's no games that are de facto playoff games, right? Like, there's no de facto playoff games tonight. There's no, like we've seen past couple of years, we've seen game 82 for some teams matter whether they got in or not.
Yep.
And I don't want to be and part of this show is to talk about things that not everyone's talking about, but I do want to bring this up because I saw a bunch of clips about this as this was getting talked about, and to me this is actually a good example of why I am actually anti-play-in game in the NHL.
Really?
Because the 82 games have mattered, right? Like the Utah Mammoth, and everyone says like, oh, the teams are this close or whatever, and that's fine. The Washington Capitals are going to be the last team out in the East. The Nashville Predators are going to be the last team out in the West. Maybe San Jose, depending. But like if you look at those two teams, you have 82 games to get it, right? And so for me, this is kind of
if you were in the Pacific Division,
correct,
you had all the chance in the world to get in over those 82 games.
Exactly. And then the other thing that I will use on that is I would really like to see the only way I'd be in on a playing game, and I'd be curious of your thoughts on this, is if it was game, and this is how you have to find a way to make it give more value to the regular season. Here's what it is. It's Friday night. So this week, right?
Okay.
So it's Friday night, 8 versus 9. Okay. 8 versus 9. Winner of that game gets number 1 on Saturday. So you give value to number 1, right?
Yep.
So for winning your conference, you have now there's something there, because I don't like the idea of change. I think being the higher seed, having Game 7 at home is enough value already. But if you want to give a little more value, is let's do, and I'm sure the PA would not like this idea completely, so maybe you'd have to do a date. But
you get to play 85 games before the playoffs.
Yeah, no, 83. I love the idea.
Well, next year will be 84, and if they have to do this,
exactly,
it'll be 85. Yeah,
true. So if you are in I wouldn't mind an 8-9 game where the winner of that game plays on, say, Friday night, and then and so let's be realistic. It's not going to be you're not going to let it be a back-to-back. So they play Friday night. The number 1 seed on both conferences get to start on Sunday. And so by getting it in that 8-9 spot, you have a 1-game playoff play-in, or whatever you want to call it, and the number 1 seed gets to watch that game, gets to be rested and fresh. That's the only way I'd really be in on the play-in idea. So I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Well, it's kind of similar to what happens in baseball, where you have those extra play-in games for the teams at the bottom of that, I think third wild card spot or whatever you call it technically. And then they get to play a team that's rested, that's been better rested. As a Dodgers fan, that's usually works to the advantage of the team that I'm following, as they tend to be a little higher up in that pecking order. But I think the principle of make success in the regular season mean more is a good one. And that to me is, I think we've talked about a little bit, whether on this show or elsewhere, about that's why the divisional seeding thing is so messed up. Because if the second and the third seeds, which also might be the second and third seeds in the conference in the West, are having to play each other instead of actually getting, the benefit of, hey, you racked up 110 points. You should have a bigger advantage in the team that got 100 or whatever, and that's just not the case in your own conference. I get maybe people don't want to do cross conference in the first round, 1 through 16, travel everything. My thing is, play in round. Gary Bettman's always seemed to be very, very against it and loves having things the way they are. I do think that once you open the gates of a play-in round, you'll see more, and they'll want to expand it because the revenue, the TV partners, everyone will want it. Although right now, my gut tells me if they did this, somehow NHL Network would find a way to grab that play-in game. Just to really, really twist the knife a little bit. But there's something there. I do like the fact that it helps the number 1 seed a little bit more, but to me, that just is going to tend to create momentum for more playing games. And maybe we'll see that when and if Gary Bettman ever steps down and a new commissioner comes in. For me, I'd say the way to reward the higher seeds is probably to go to the true 1 through 8 seeding first, and then look at the play-in game. But honestly, it'd be really fun. I'd really enjoy. Well, maybe it wouldn't be fun this year in the West because no one seems to want that seed. But generally speaking, it would be really fun. Maybe Rick Bowness would have been a little bit happier if his team had still had that to play for the other night.
Well, and we'll talk about Rick in a second, but I will tell you, it would have been from a ratings Boone perspective tonight, if I had told you Ovechkin was playing basically one game to continue his career, that's going to be like, that one would have been TNT and ESPN would be fist fighting over getting that game for 8 versus 9. So,
yeah.
But you brought up our pal Rick Bowness, and I can say that because he is a friend of the show. Was guest number 4 on Algorithmically Incorrect Hockey. I think it's the first time we've said the show, by the way. So if you're watching and you're amongst if you're amongst the live, that goes, put that in the producer notes for next week. Producer, remind us to introduce the show.
Tell people what is happening. Good.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Actually introduce the show. There's
this is good stuff.
These are great notes. I'm gonna put that on a big sticky note on the desk right here. Yes. But we had our friend of the program on the show last week. We had Rick Bowness. They were actually coming off, which I believe might have been their last win of the season. So against Detroit, where they had battled back, and they were getting ready for a game in Buffalo. And the Blue Jackets, now infamously or famously, depending on whether you're in Central Ohio or not, did not make the playoffs. They missed by 5 points, actually, after a really strong surge when Bowness took over the team. And he brought the fire in the post game last night, right? Like there was some heat in the post game, and it was I don't want to say I was surprised, because I know that that's something that is within Rick. I've seen it. We've seen it a little bit. We've seen it with Winnipeg. We never had that. I've known, and obviously.
Well, I remember him grabbing a stick in Dallas and slamming it against the boards after some officiating he wasn't too thrilled with. So we saw a little bit of that fire in different ways in Dallas.
Correct. So it was interesting watching it last night, because he said when he was on our show last week, and I love being able to reference that, because we've actually done a pretty good job with booking guests, and if all goes according to plan and our producer is able to get our next guest on, they'll be on in about 12 minutes. He talked about how the passion was still there, right? And in that post game last night, there's obviously, you can't not call that passion, right? Like with where that is and the approach, and not saying he was pushing to keep his job or get the job, because him and Don Waddell plan to talk about it after the season. But I mean, we know how these things work, right? Like, you can't help but look at that and think he was obviously ticked, but he wants the chance to fix that problem.
How do you look at it if you're Don Waddell and you sit down with him and Rick Bowness says, you heard what I said, things got hard. They stopped trying. They stopped caring. There's a lack of compete. You saw that last game, even though it didn't matter, we still, asked them to show what they had, because we want to see that they can still compete, and they didn't. That's a cultural issue. If you're Don Waddell, don't you kind of say, well, So the first 10 games or 12 games when you were here, the culture was great, and then it stopped being great. You said it's because it got hard. Why? So you're a good coach when things are easy, but your message doesn't work. Why should I think? Right. And again, this conversation will not go like this. They've known each other a long time. We know this. Don Waddell thing, it says, I think he didn't even call anyone else, right? I think he was just Rick Bowness. And Rick Bowness said last week,
Rick
he basically doesn't even interview. He
didn't interview. So it's
So if they didn't interview, they probably won't do an exit interview either. But whatever that conversation is, if you're Don Waddell, don't you at least ask him?
Yeah.
Okay, how is this all on them? So the first 10, everyone was praising you and saying, wow,
Correct.
Bowness comes in, gives him the juice, and everything's going great. And then his juice doesn't work when things get hard, as he said.
Yeah.
How is the success you and the failure of the players? Like, maybe it is. Again, if you watch any of those games, I watched like two of those last games. They looked bad. I mean, they did look bad. You could tell. It did not look like a good team. But that's on him too, a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It's you get the credit for being the crisis manager, and then as you work your way through the crisis, you become part of the fabric, right? So it was 37 games. Like, it's not.
And he'd say that, right? He'd say that. Like, if I had a whole runway preseason to build the culture, then it would be different.
Correct. Like, I think it's a really good. It's actually a really interesting side by side to look at. The other team I obviously I'm here in Detroit and I see the Red Wings. It's actually a fascinating side by side.
How are they doing? I checked a few months ago. They were doing really well.
And I actually see we don't always check the comments because we're trying to focus on here. But I saw Chris in the chat. Matt talked about the Red Wings, so we will. I think it is worth mentioning that. And I appreciate you being here, Chris, and everyone who's watching this show live, and then obviously who's either watching later or listening in on your favorite audio platform that you may or may not have. I think the Bowness situation is very similar to the Todd McLellan situation in Detroit, where not that he's free of blame in year one, but you take over midseason and you're kind of, it's like,
I'm glad you brought this up because I was exactly going to ask, why didn't Todd McLellan have a moment like Rick Bowness did?
And I think Todd did, but it wasn't, Todd was a little more measured media wise. And I have a couple theories on why that is, but Todd had the moments where he took over that Red Wings team now. And I think even some people made t-shirts for it where he's yelling at the team to play effing hockey. Right. Yep. And so Todd had half a year, and then this year and then last year you're kind of like, well, okay, he came in and he got them a bit further, even though if you look under the hood, they were very similar to the Derek Lalonde Red Wings from the first half, just with a little bit more juice from a couple younger players and a little more energy. And then this year he comes in and this is supposed to be, this year then falls fully on Todd McLellan and me, where it falls on the players and Steve Yzerman as well, but from a coaching perspective, right? Like last year when you're doing the coaching report card, there's not a DNF because he did finish, but there is what's the educational term for not enough data to actually grade? Like
I should probably know this.
Insufficient
or incomplete.
Yeah, and there was something like that with Todd McLellan last year, where I think this year you come in and this is Todd McLellan's team, and you look at why wasn't he able? Now, obviously, this is not to pull blame off of what happened with the players in that leadership core. It's been 4 Marches and Aprils in a row where they've just crumbled and collapsed. The team has
different coaches too.
Under different coaches, same GM, basically the same front office the entire time. So obviously, there's that's where you kind of go into that. And so if you're the Blue Jackets and you're Don, I think you have to kind of look 3.5 hours north to Detroit and kind of look at that. Where is this something where if I give Rick Bowness a full training camp, if I give him this, am I going to have the run? Is it going to be, am I going to be in the same thing? Or is it time to go move on to someone else that's going to be around? The other problem with that Columbus job, and this is just the perspective, it's, and coaching turnover is ridiculous in the NHL anyway, but that Columbus job, you go since obviously the Mike Babcock situation, Pascal Vincent doesn't work out well, Dean Evanson gets the boot after not a long time, and as much as I like Rick the person, and once again I think he's a good chaos and crisis manager of a coach.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
The reality is he's not the long-term guy that's going to be there for more than, even if he was going to be for 2 years after this, right? There's not a long-term build. So just to the age, that's just the reality.
And we've seen it 3 times, right? He came into Dallas and Jim Montgomery got fired. They went to the Cup final that year in the bubble, but that's, if you want a crisis, talk about that. That's a crisis. Yeah. Winnipeg, right? He came in specifically to fix the culture after their coach quit on him. After Paul Maurice quit on Winnipeg and said, I can't do anything here. And people seem to think Maurice is a pretty good coach because of what he's done since then. But Bowness got that team basically teed up. Then because of health issues with him and his wife, he handed it off to Scott Arniel. President's Trophy last year. Great season for Winnipeg. They gave him a lot of credit for doing that. This year he comes into Columbus. Again, scuffling. People went, wow, late in the season. Okay, hire Bowness. And boom, they go on this heater again. So he's done it 3 times in a row, but also long-term. What I was going to say is, why do you think? Is it a tactical thing? Is it like a Pete DeBoer type thing and John Tortorella, where the message is, or Bruce Cassidy, like the message is so it wears thin after a while because he runs so hot? What is it?
Yeah, I think with Rick, I think part of the the reality for him is I think he's a good X's and O's coach. Everyone who's an NHL head coach is obviously a good X's and O's head coach, right? Like I don't want to be, but he's someone who I think from a tactician perspective probably needs a producer note. I need to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I just got a random add that to producer notes. He's someone who I think he needs this. I think he needs that strong tactician as a lead assistant. I think he's someone who's like that because some guys are like that.
The lieutenant, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. So and I think there's some guys who just are like that, right? Like I think Pete DeBoer, for example, is a really good. Pete is actually one of the better X's and O's coaches in the league. If you talk to coaches and you talk to people in the coaching community, and I've talked to Pete before, and it's kind of his softer side, but it's not that like Pete actually can connect the game really well. Pete's problem is connecting the people. Like I honestly think a Rick Bowness, Pete DeBoer pairing would actually work really well because I think there's an emotional connection that Rick can get from his players. I will be interested to see.
The Stars tried a two-headed GM for a while. Maybe they should try a two-headed coach.
You mean when they brought in the president? What was it? The president
of fun. Yep.
Brett Hull, president of fun. So
yeah,
it's that was definitely a fun experience for Stars fans and everything like that. And Les Jackson was the other GM at the time, and you know I feel I'm happy for Les. He's got his 2 Stanley Cup rings because he's been an assistant with on the Florida staff the past couple years, because the irony for Les is he was part of the Stars for like 30 something years. The one year he wasn't was 99.
Yep.
Because he was an assistant GM for the Atlanta Thrashers that year. So I was happy to see him kind of finally get those cup rings. It's I
derailed you though. You were talking about why you need a coach that can
but it makes sense. Like I think you need kind of that. You need a coach that you got to fall into different lanes, right? Like, and Rick is more of a coach that lets his assistants. He's a very good defensive coach. I want to be clear on that. I think Rick is is a really great defensive mind. Works really well with defensemen. Helped Victor Hedman raves about him taking his game to the next step in his career and everything like that. So, I think there's elements of that. I don't know about running a forward bench, how much that is his strength, and that's just a reality. So. You kind of need that makeup of a staff, and as a GM, you've got to be able to look at that and figure and kind of figure out what does and doesn't work for you on that. So it's
Do you think there's a world where we'll get to a point where people always talk about, and I remember being in Dallas, him Glenn Goldson saying when he came in, my goal isn't to bring my system in and smack it on top of the players, but to build a system that fits with the players that we already have, with the core that we already have. Do you think there's a world where you would actually look for like specialized assistants who, this guy, Rick Bowness, we want him running our blue line, connecting with the defensemen, developing our young guys. We want him in here. We want to bring in a head coach who maybe you have a goalie coach too, who you just think is the world of, and you want to keep your goalie coach, you want to keep your D coach, and you want to bring in a head coach who can mesh with those assistants. Do you think we're getting to a point where teams would actually start to do that instead of building from the top down and coaching, and the coach gets to bring in some or all the assistants? They actually start to build it a little bit the other way around and bring in a head coach who can mesh with the assistants they kind of want.
Yeah, I think it's as the money gets involved in this, right? Like, and I'm not trying to compare everything to soccer, but global soccer is the richest, biggest game in the world, right? And you see, I mean, Liverpool for a long time was a big deal. I think Liverpool was one of the only teams with a throw-in coach, right? Like, and the specialization of where this is going, like within hockey, right? Like there's teams that have gone to the full-blown goaltending department now when it comes to building out staff. So I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. I mean, there's a salary cap on what you can pay your players. There's not a salary cap or evening factor for what you can pay your staff and kind of use those resources. And I think so. Yes, I think it's a line I use for a lot of things in sports, but it's true. If you follow the money on this, I think it's a fair point. So
well, and there's the Peter principle there too, where a lot of times an assistant wants to get to that point because the head coach is naturally the next point, and some coaches absolutely you can see that's where they belong and they'll get there, but in some cases, there are probably you don't see too many goalie coaches angling for that job, right? A lot of times the power play coach or maybe the guy running the blue line, he's the guy angling for a head coaching job eventually or goes down to the AHL. But it's the paths are very different. And I'd be curious to see if we start seeing more of that, where you build the coaching staff from the bottom up instead of just the head coach and top down.
Yeah. Well, perfect segue here, talking about goaltending. Very excited about bringing on our next guest on the show. And I'm going to, as our crack producer, I'm going to see if I can make this work. We're going to bring on Steve Thompson, and I'm going to I believe the official title is Manager of Player Development Goaltending for USA Hockey. I believe that is the official title. I just call him Steve and the goalie guru I talk to every summer when he runs his camp in Plymouth. So I hope I got the title right, but we're going to bring Steve onto the show now, and I'm very excited about this. So we got him on.
There you go. Can you hear us, Steve?
Steve, can you hear us?
You might be muted. We can't hear you. Or maybe they talk about goalie whisperers, right? Maybe this is a thing where goaltending coaches also whisper. This could be.
Yes.
Is that any better?
Yeah, we got you. There we go. We got you.
There you go.
Yeah, I was goalie whispering to you. You just couldn't hear me. You must not be a former goalie.
Go ahead, Steve. Sorry about that.
No, you're all good. I think I might have been losing the internet for a second. I got you now.
So, Steve, appreciate bringing you on. And I'm hearing the echo on myself once again. Throw it on our producer notes to get us better for this in the future. First off, get the title right. Manager of Player Development Goaltending.
Yeah, you got it perfect. Yeah, so I work in the player development department amongst probably about 8 other player development managers who try and make America's athletes the best athletes in the world and trying to bring the best experience. And I just happen to focus in the position of goaltender. And so talking butterfly glove saves pad stacks all day. Nothing wrong with that.
Steve, I'm curious. People talk a lot about development in Canada. There's a big article that came out last year about goaltending in Canada kind of shrinking. What do you see in the U.S. in terms of young goaltender participation and growth? How do you build that?
Yeah, so I would say that North America is having a goalie shortage issue in general. It's not just Canada. We started measuring our goalie statistics about 6 years ago, and at that point in time, we were at about 5.2% of our hockey population were goalies. And if you think about it from a team perspective, if 10% of our hockey population were goalies, that means on a 20-person roster, you'd have 2 goalies on your team, and maybe on a more recreational team that has 10 players, one of those players would be goalie. So the fact we were sitting at just over 5% means that we were basically averaging 1 goalie per team. And what was scary about that is we know how many teams when we go to a rink have 2 goalies on a roster. So if there's that many teams that have 2, think of how many must have 0 in order our average to be 5%. So, we're certainly not crushing it in a goalie participation perspective, but we are improving. Since we started measuring that statistic 6 years ago, we've now grown to about 6.5%. So we've gone about 2%, 3% better every single year. We have a lot of programming that is specifically geared towards getting more kids to try goalie and to make that experience better so that they want to stay in net when they try it. And I think it's going to have to be collectively that Canada and ourselves work together to make goaltending more attractive and to maybe change some of the culture and the stigma around the position that, quite frankly, our European competitors don't have. It's an honor to be a goalie in those countries. You earn the opportunity to be in this awesome, respected position where I think we have a little bit of the Goldberg effect in our country, in our continent, where it's the kid who skated the least growing up that gets thrown in net, maybe the kid that has the least cardio conditioning and doesn't feel like they should skate up and down the ice, so keep them in the crease. And naturally, if those are the kids that you're throwing in net, you're probably not going to have very many that stick in sport, and you're probably not going to have very many that are high-performing athletes. So I think it's more of a culture issue than anything else.
Do you kind of go and attack that culture? And what are some of the things you mentioned? Some of those other European countries, and looking at that, what are some things that you've kind of highlighted around there? You mentioned it's an honor more to be in net in Finland or Sweden or wherever. Like, how do you you mentioned working together and combating that. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just changing some of the outdated perspective on the role. I mean, if you played goalie in the 50s, you didn't have a mask on. If you made a save, you were bleeding. If you didn't make a save, you weren't good at your job. I could see why the goalie position would be seen as kind of crazy back then. And I've got a lot of respect for the people that played goalie back then, because I don't know if I would have been one of them. It took an absolute warrior and somebody that, again, oftentimes the stigma was a little different or crazy or weird or whatever those, things were. But that's different now. I mean, goalie is the safest position in hockey if you look at the statistics on injury and acute injury specifically. So, I don't think it takes it. You don't have to be all that crazy to want to be a goalie these days with the innovations that have come to the equipment and the rules around the game. I mean, the referees are very protective of the crease. The equipment is just super padded these days, where you're not feeling the puck all that often unless you're doing something wrong. There's still some pressure associated with the role, but we like to think of that as a privilege. What an honor to have your son or daughter be the person that has so much control over a game. That's going to make you a better decision maker in a boardroom one day when they have a real job. It's going to make them a better father or mother amongst a family when they have to make family decisions, where they've been making decisions that impact their hockey family their whole life. And now when there's tough decisions to be made later in life, they're well equipped to do that. And so we really just share the benefits that come with all the responsibility, instead of always thinking about the negatives of, well, are you sure you want all that pressure? Are you sure you want everybody to be judging every decision you make? It's like, absolutely, because I want to be a leader one day, and that's what's required out of great leaders.
Speaking of that side of things, we talk a lot about the pressure on goalies. There's even Linus Ullmark is a great example in the NHL right now, where clearly it's a very tough position. You make one mistake, there's red lights and sirens and spotlights and everything. And that's tough. How do you work on that at younger levels, whether it's at really the youth level or even up to minor hockey, or even players who are getting close to going pro? How is that something a player either has or they don't? Is it something that you can coach or help them with? Does it come from their family? It's probably all a little bit of those, but I'm curious how you guys talk about that and think about that.
Yeah, it's so important. I'm so glad you brought this point up, because this is an area that we have been innovative across the world. And I'm hopeful that USA Hockey in general is going to follow suit. And we're seeing other countries that are starting to hear what we're preaching and start to preach it themselves. And that's that we have to protect our youngest. We can't treat an 8-year-old goalie like a 30-year-old goalie. We can't treat a 14-year-old travel goalie. I think oftentimes our country thinks, well, if you're a recreational player, then we should treat you like a kid. But if you're on the travel, the AAA, the Tier 1 team, then you're not a kid anymore. You have to be an adult. You just happen to be living in a 12-year-old body, and deal with it. And that just isn't the way to go. And that's something that we're really trying to change. So if you think about the history of the position, the goalie role was always seen as you have a starter and you have a backup, and you play the entire game, and either you win the game and it was your saves that won the game, or you lose the game, and because pucks went by you, you're a loser. And that was the way that it's always been perceived. And we saw a lot of that in youth hockey, where you'll see an 11-year-old that has 7 goals against in a game, and now they're not invited to a sleepover. Now they're not sitting in the cool corner of the locker room. There's a lot of social pressure that comes with that. And that leads to a lot of burnout. That leads to a lot of kids switching positions. That leads to maybe not the healthiest behaviors that these goalies are learning as to how to deal with these things. Sometimes they ostracize themselves from their teammates. They try and put on a false persona, and they become bigger than the team. And we don't want any of that behavior. We want you to be a great teammate, and we want it to be seen as a team position. You're not just a private contractor on a team. And so what we've done is we've encouraged our younger teams that if you're at 8U, everybody plays all positions. We're trying to have this new goalie how hat trick, where if you have a goal, a save, and a shutout, you get a sticker. And we want to try and collect as many goalie how hat tricks as we can get to try and, again, have our goalies be better athletes. They learn how to shoot and score. They learn how to skate, but they also learn how to make saves. But then bigger than that, everybody on the team has played the position of goal. So now when they specialize later in life, they might have a little more empathy for their goalie, because they played goalie long enough to remember how intense it is when a puck from the red line goes in. And now they're like, I want to judge, but I remember when that puck went in on me, and that felt pretty poor. So I don't want to talk trash because I remember what that feels like. Parents are the same way. We've heard way too many 12-year-old parents in the stands talking about 11-year-old goalies as if they're Linus Ullmark, and they're criticizing their every move. And sometimes you shake your head and think, do they realize that they're talking about an 11-year-old right now? Are they just regurgitating what they hear on Monday morning news radio because that's what they hear when people talk about goalies in hockey? And so we're trying to protect our young kids. At 10U, we want to see them play half periods instead of full games. At 12U, split the game in half. At 14 and older, maybe you have some full games on games where you have 2 games in a day, and one plays the morning game, one plays the evening game. And then also being very intentional about language. It's the starter and the closer. It's not the starter and the backup. Who wants to be a backup? That's such poor language to describe somebody's role. In baseball, when you're the closer, they play the music, they turn the lights out, they got the strobe lights going. That's intense. That's awesome. It's an honor to be the closer. We want that in hockey. Go in at the halfway point of the second and close it. It might be challenging. You might be down by 2 and you have the thinnest red line that you have to make every save if your team's going to come back. And that's a privilege to have that honor. It's hard to start a game. You're thinking about it all night when you're laying in bed, knowing you're starting that game. Both are challenging, and we're hoping that our American goalies have shorter sample sizes when they're younger so that they're mentally more mature when they play the full game. And then also they get to be the closer and they get to understand what it's like to go in cold, knowing that when they are a junior, college, or pro goalie, often the time that they get to shine is when they're going in relief, whether it's poor performance by their goalie partner or an injury, and they don't have the time to get warmed up. They have to go in and do their job, or it might be their only opportunity at that level. And we're hoping that if other countries aren't doing that and ours are, our American goalies will be ready to rock and roll the minute they're called on and not need, a full warm up and everything else that we think we need.
You mentioned, you and I have spoken before, and one of the things I always found, one of the lines I always liked, you and I have talked about kind of the coaching of it, and you've said one of the things we need to do, you've worked on, is going through and creating a position of problem solvers as opposed to a position of just full technicians. And obviously there's been kind of trying to implement that more and more into the coaching perspective. I'm curious also, is that part of all of these when you kind of diagnose the problem, when you quote unquote have to win the 9-year-old game, when you have to win the 8U game and everything like that, has that also created a little bit of this problem where, like, if you're a defenseman or a forward or in other sports, you can go try dumb stuff. You can try and figure out things. But when all of a sudden it becomes, well, hey, what this kid does, and if he makes this mistake, this team loses. Like, how much is that kind of funneled into kind of the robotic problem we've seen that you kind of sometimes have to coach out of kids if they do stick with it?
For sure. John Van Biesbroek shared this with me when I first started with USA Hockey, one of the best American goalies, best goalies of all time, that the position is more of an art than a science, but yet we've lost that over the last handful of years. And that when his generation of goalies were making it an art form, you saw a lot of diversity in the way that men stop pucks, women stop pucks. And today, everyone kind of does it the same way because we've created this scientific approach of angles and save selections and all these details that you have to do it so robotically, where quite frankly, the NHL's seen the lowest save percentage since, I think, the early 90s, the 80s. And so it's clearly our scientific method isn't working. We need to get back to a more artistic form of creative puck stoppers. And so that's a big area that we're trying to focus on with our American development model, is encouraging our goalies to be individuals and allowing them to think differently and to use their own strengths and weaknesses and to figure out their own methods. There's lots of different ways to stop the puck, but only if we allow our athletes to creatively think about different ways. If we pigeonhole them all as being 6'5" and we all teach them the RVH and that they must be at this specific depth when the puck's at this specific area, there's no problem solving. They're just robotically moving around the crease. And that's been an issue. And I think you're exactly right that the competitive landscape of youth hockey has really forced us to try and coach to the percentages instead of allowing them to explore when they're younger. I think volleyball is a great example of this. If you watch youth volleyball and there's coaches that are trying to win at all costs, they just tell them to get the ball over the net, because volleyball is so hard in the youth sport that odds are if you get it over, they're going to screw up before they get it back to you. But if you watch a great developmental volleyball coach, they're teaching them how to pass and to spike, and they're working the ball. They know that they're going to have some failure and they're probably going to give up some points because a pass is going to go awry. The set's not going to be perfect for them, but they're learning and they understand that's more important to the long-term goals of their volleyball athletes over just bump it over every single time. For anybody that's ever played sand volleyball or just, beer league volleyball, it's the name of the game. Get it over, let them screw up, and we'll win and we'll get out of here. But that's not how you develop the skills that are required to be a high-end athlete later in life. And we certainly see that lower skill goaltending. If you butterfly at all costs when you're younger, kids can't lift the puck. That's your secret sauce. And then we're spending the rest of our lives trying to correct that out of you, because now you're butterflying on by default. And no matter if the puck's going 10 feet over the net, you're on your knees, because you've been conditioned as a younger goalie that, well, if you cover the low end of the rink, you're going to win the game. And let's win at all costs, instead of thinking critically about reading the release and what save selection is going to control the puck or put you in a good position for the next puck. It's all about stop today's puck and maybe not foreshadowing what tomorrow's puck might look like.
I want to kind of go on this category, because I'm curious, because it's something that I'm fascinated about as we go down this path. Like, I look, and the data's there. I think in the top 2 men's leagues in North America, in the NHL, the AHL, there's only one goalie sub 6 foot playing regular minutes, and that's UC Saros in Nashville. I was in Vegas last week at the Frozen Four, and I see 3 of the 4 goalies are 5'10" or shorter, including the goalie for Denver, who wins and has a great Frozen Four showing Johnny Hicks at Denver. Where, as we talk about, as this position's gotten larger and larger, right? And where do you fall on this size debate? And the other thing I wonder is, you talk about getting as many kids to play the position. Are we also running into a trap of, hey, you're the tall kid, you go in net? Like, are we running, like, just kind of, I'm curious for your take on the size, where we are in the size thing, and if that's also becoming a little bit of, unfortunately, too self-fulfilling in some cases.
Yeah, I definitely think if we're going to grow the game and grow the position, we cannot get into this idea of, if your parents are not 6'2" or taller, then you should just go grab your gymnastics bar and head to the gym, because you're never going to be a goalie. The realities are, we've seen a lot of successful goalies play in a 6x4 net for hundreds of years. It can be done. Sub 6 is possible. We've seen it at the Division I level. And I mean, I felt like I was watching the games on fast forward this weekend. I couldn't believe how fast paced these hockey games were at the Division I level. So I think Division I hockey's never been better. And you can't argue that, now the small goalies are playing because it's college hockey and it's not great hockey. It's not professional hockey. I think some could argue that it's the best Division I hockey we've ever witnessed, with the expansion of the player pool and just how great a quality athletes we do have at those ages these days. So it can be done. I know the argument that I hear most often is that it's less about their ability to cover the net. We all know that smaller bodies can cover that frame. We've seen that before. But as the game in general has evolved into larger people in the NHL, it's just harder to find the puck. If you are shorter than the defenders and the forwards at the net front, it's harder for you to find sight lines when that puck's at the blue line and getting to you. And so I would be curious if we looked at the information on goalies in the American League, goalies in the NHL, goalies, other pro leagues or college hockey, European leagues, etc. Is that just an anecdote that we believe that smaller goalies can't find the puck? Or do the statistics suggest that the realities are, if you have a 6'5" defenseman and you've got a 6'4" forward at the net, that it is harder to find the puck, and that we might not have as much success if you're not seeing it as often? But I can't trust right now that it's data driven. I think it's more anecdotal. I know a lot of GMs that are just hell-bent that if the goalie's not there 6'2", we won't even talk about him. I don't care how many pucks he's saved. If he's not 6'2", don't even talk about him for our draft list. And I think they're missing out on some hidden gems. And I think that trend is swinging in the other direction. I think 5 years ago, it was very specific that they had to be tall. I'm hoping some of these weapons in the Division I level are going to now earn opportunities at the pro level and prove that it can be done, and it can be done today.
I'd love to talk a little bit about the glove for goalies. You and Sean may have even had this entire conversation before, I don't know, but I was watching a broadcast the other day, and I think it might have been Tuukka Rask was talking about a fingers up goalie versus a fingers down or fingers to the side or whatever, and that got me thinking about a lot of things about the glove, including using the glove as a blocker more than a catcher, things like that. But I'd be curious to hear how you have seen approach specifically to how the glove is talked about for goalies, how it's used, how it maybe should be used or isn't used or used to be used, or what goes into even decisions as far as, are you going to keep fingers up or fingers to the side? Is there an optimal position? What does it all depend on? Is it just preference? Because all of those little things, every time a goal gets scored, everyone wants to pick apart, oh, well, they put the blocker here instead of there. They put the glove there instead of here. But I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into it that goaltending dummies like myself have no clue about. So I'd love to hear a lot of what you think about all that.
Yeah. So first off, I think a lot of this is technology driven. So if you think back to the older gloves back in the 80s, if you didn't catch that puck in the pocket, it hurt you. And so a lot of people were really good at catching it right in the webbing because they didn't want a stinger in the middle of their palm. They caught a lot of pucks that were going to their body because if they caught one off the body, the chest protectors weren't very good. So it hurt you if you didn't catch it. So I think the hand-eye coordination was better. I think a lot of people argue that kids don't play multi-sports anymore. And I think maybe there's less kids playing baseball and maybe that's contributing to that. But I think the reality is we do specifically want to see our goalies playing other sports. We want them to be well-rounded athletes. We want them to have the mental health that comes with taking a break from hockey, the physical health that comes from taking a break from goaltender. There's a lot of overuse injuries that happen when you play goalie 12 months out of the year for 13 years of your life. So I'm not saying that there's no benefit to multi-sport training, but I do think the bigger culprit probably is just when you're getting instant feedback, i.e. pain, when you don't catch it correctly, you learn to catch it very quickly. And I don't think we want to go back in time where we're hurting kids if they don't do things properly. But that was instant feedback that you better learn how to catch this puck or it's going to be a long day at the office. And so people got pretty good at it. Now, as far as decision making with where to hold the glove, I think that comes back to Sean's earlier point about this very calculated coaching them up mentality of, well, my goalie coach thinks that I should hold my glove at noon, so I'm always going to hold my glove here. Well, now they're showing that they're going to shoot just above the pad. And now that's a really far range of motion that they got to bring their hand down to catch that puck. Or conversely, maybe they got a goalie coach that says you should always have it at 3 o'clock. Well, now someone puts one by your ear, and that's a huge range of motion to try and get that puck by your ear. So there's a time and place. And I think a lot of it is based on decision-making, on reading the blade angle, reading the angle of the shot. If you can kind of mentally work with me here, if you envision someone going down the half wall on your glove side as a goalie, the more that puck gets closer to the goal line, the less angle of the net that's available to them. If they're standing in the middle of the rink, the whole net is available. As they get closer to that goal line, it's going to be just like a pizza cut out of how much net that's available. So if you hold your glove at 3 o'clock to the side, your glove is oftentimes covering the boards behind the net or covering the net, not even in the net. But if you bring your hand up, so like in the video, you can kind of see it. As I'm getting closer to this post, the more I bring my hand up, the more likely my net's still in the net, my hand's still in the net covering space. And so it might just be your positioning. Where in the middle of the rink, your hand's at 3. As you get more to your left, your hand's going to come back up to noon so that you're just staying within the frame of the net. Box control is what the Swedes love to call that. They're staying within the box of the net as they move. But a lot of goalies aren't intentional with it. They just think, well, my goalie coach said I must hold it here. And so irregardless of the read of the shot, of the position of the net, they keep their glove where they're told to. Or they caught a few pucks and maybe they don't have a goalie coach and they're just learning by fire. They maybe have a favorite goalie. They think that their goalie always holds their glove in one position, so they try and mimic that behavior, but they're not understanding the ramifications of holding it in that spot. So I think the future of the position, and maybe it was the past of the position, is thinking about, okay, when I hold my glove here, what are the pros and cons? These are the things that I'm going to benefit from. These are the risks that are going to come with that. And if I hold my glove here, these are the pros and cons. And really having an understanding of all the pros and cons that come with every decision, and then understanding the game well enough to make those decisions in real time.
Steve, I'm curious, and I'm going to, for one, I'm as someone who is now going to attend.
That was fascinating to me, by the way. I'll just jump in. I learned something. So thank you for that.
For someone who's going to try to take these thoughts and hopefully my beer league game goes better tonight than last week. What I'm curious when it comes to when you're teaching young kids to join the position, and as someone who I still attempt to play on Wednesday nights on beer league and played roller hockey growing up, but I didn't pick it up till I was 12 or 13 years old. So I didn't really, and I was playing roller hockey first. And so I never really I'm 36. I was that age group that you didn't really have a goalie coach. So it was I was imitating Dominic Moore because he was fun. But I remember when I was in high school, you would talk to goalie coaches and they'd be like, oh, well, glove and block are even, right? Glove and block are even and everything like that. And so I'm curious now when you're teaching a kid how to play the position now, what's the level of, when you're going through that kind of, hey, get everyone in there, what's the level of instruction versus letting them figure it out? Like, what's kind of the balance that you guys are trying to figure out here so that the kid can figure out what's best for him, as opposed to saying, hey, you must hold your glove and blocker even at all time, and then all of a sudden that becomes the robotic approach right away.
Yeah, I love to, number one, they have to be comfortable. So that's the biggest piece is, do you feel comfortable in this position? Now, there's some foundations to athleticism that no matter what you're doing, if you're returning a tennis ball, if you're squatting a bar, roughly your feet are shoulder width apart. You're usually hinging at your hips. You're bending at your knees. Your shoulders, knees, and toes are in alignment. Like, there's some fundamentals to just athleticism that come into play. And that would be the same for the goalie stance. You're looking for roughly feet just outside the shoulders, knees are bent, hips forward, like all those different things. You're trying to find that, weight in the balls of your feet. But from there, there's then variance based on your height and your own comfortability. Everybody's bodies are a little bit different. So I think what we like to do is kind of get them into their goalie stance and just say, does this feel comfortable to you? And let them explore with that comfort level and understand, okay, this position that you've put yourself in, it feels right. You feel like a goalie. You look like a goalie. Let's play. And then let them kind of learn trial by fire a little bit. They're going to have some goals go in, and you might see 1,000 things you want to correct. But I think the art of coaching is knowing what to prioritize. If you come in and you say, stick on the ice, hey, you got to hold your glove up. Hey, make sure your blocker's this. Make sure your chin's forward. You have 8 different cues that you're giving every day. Your goalie's going to feel like, 1, they're terrible and they've got a billion things they need to fix. And then 2, they're not going to know what to focus on. You tell them to fix the glove, they do it, but then the puck goes 5-hole and now you're yelling at them about the stick, and now they're trying to remember the stick, and now their glove goes back to where it was. So I think as a coach, you really got to identify what's our priority, what's our foundation to what's going to make the biggest room of improvement for our goalie. And then let's just be blind to everything else. Let's just make sure we give them positive reinforcement on the cues that we're providing today. And then we try and support them when they're struggling with the cues for today. And then maybe as we just take notes on everything else. And then we kind of build a season plan in our head. Okay, there's 1,000 things we want to work on, but I'm going to be patient. I'm going to focus on this one skill for however long until we feel like we're ready to move on, whether it's because they've mastered that skill, or sometimes you just need some novelty. It gets boring for anybody, not just kids. If you're working on one specific skill forever, they might lose interest in the position or the skill itself. So it might be time just to move on for just novelty's sake. But I really think let them figure it out. Let them have some success and make them proud of that success. Let them fail and then try and challenge them to think differently about new solutions based on that consistent failure. And the last point I would add for coaches on the call is, I learned this from Roger Grillo, who is a longtime player development manager for USA Hockey, and he's now with the Montreal Canadiens. And he was really intentional about looking for patterns, not one-offs. Because it's really easy to just see something and say something as a coach, but you're looking for patterns of play. If they're trying something new and something goes awry, you don't want to immediately jump down their throat because now they're afraid to try new things. Or maybe your athlete's better than that and they have just a weird day. You don't want to just criticize them all of a sudden on something that they've never shown you to be a problem the entire year. And then all of a sudden on Thursday, they just can't make a pass. And now we're frustrated with their puck handling skills. So look for patterns and identify that it's truly an issue before you talk, which takes some patience. And I think that's learned over time as a coach. And then prioritize what's most important and be really intentional with what you choose to talk about.
Well, I think you showed that patience early when I was having some trouble sorting out the audio when you first came on. So I appreciate you demonstrating that already. Last one for me. I mean, I could talk for a while, and maybe you and Sean will. I don't know. But last one for me, I'm curious of all those different discrete skills that you and tools, or however you talk about them, that you work on goalies with. Is there one that tends to be kind of the last one to come for goalies? I'm sure there's some variety, of course, but to me, again, very ignorant goalie dummy over here. To me, the blocker always seems really complicated to me because it's not as, glove. Maybe it's just that I grew up playing baseball or something. So the glove to me is very intuitive. The blocker is more your back, moving that, the motion, how aggressive you want to be. I imagine you want it as far out as possible. It seems like when goalies are playing well, their blocker tends to be really active, but I don't know. I have no clue. What would you say tends to be kind of the last piece of the puzzle, at least most often, whether it's mechanically or specific tool for those goalies?
Typically it's play reading. The physical skills of the game are pretty easy to teach, which is why there are so many coaches out there that are micromanaging the goalie's decisions. Because if you're, a paying customer and you're doing a private lesson, you want to see instant feedback. You want to make sure that you spent this amount of money and you saw change and you saw it and it's worth your dollar. So the first thing that you can do as a coach to prove that you're worth your salt is make some physical changes with a goalie. The goalies can learn it pretty quickly. They'll have some success right away. It's really hard to teach play reading. It takes a lot of patience because you have to let them fail, which doesn't look very good. It takes a lot of repetitions, which means you might do one lesson and might not see any improvement. You might actually see some kids get worse before they get better because now they're thinking more than they were before. And now they're not maybe thinking about the puck as often because they were all in their head about their positioning and their decision making and reading the stick. So you might see goals go in. And so it's really hard for a business model perspective to focus on play reading, because you might have parents that go to the next goalie coach because they're like, well, this goalie coach made my son or daughter worse. When the reality is, if they would have just waited a little bit longer for them to really work through the problem solving elements, they were going to be better goalies for it. I think tennis has a very similar problem with this. When you change a tennis player's game, their game usually dips for a while. And how many professional athletes are willing to lose some big tournaments because they want to fix their serve? It takes a special person and a lot of trust in a new coach before they just bail on a coach because they've served 13 double faults and haven't hit an ace in a while. And so I think goalies kind of got that same boat. We got to be patient with it. But the physical side of the game is pretty simple from my perspective. I mean, I would even argue that the blocker is simpler than the glove because there's less variance. The stick kind of forces your blocker into a space. I would be curious if you had 2 blockers and 2 sticks, if our goalies would actually be better, because you have so much range of motion and you have so much variability in your glove that you can kind of get a little wild with it, and you can really get your positioning out of whack, where the stick kind of forces your blocker to be in the right spot. And so it really simplifies the decision making. It really simplifies the range of motion. So oftentimes with goalies, I see goalies that are pretty good with their blockers because there's not much to think about. The stick kind of forces them into a couple different positions and they just watch the puck and move it. Rebound control is an area that they can improve by changing the angle of their blocker as the puck gets to them. But the glove, I mean, you can, like you were talking about, you can have your glove at noon, you can have it at 3, you can have it, some have it like you see the back of their glove. I remember some goalies, a couple of years ago, they were doing that. So you can kind of get Wild West with your glove a little bit. With a blocker, you're kind of held to where it is just based on the way that you hold a goalie stick these days.
Well, I think what needs to happen now is Sean needs to go rock the double blocker, double stick setup at his next beer league game for science, for the sake of science. So Sean, it's on you now.
That's we can think about that, Robert. We can then work on.
We've thought about it. We've thought about it. It's been decided.
We can think about that project. We can put that right up there with my question. I think I don't know if we've said it on the air before or not, but I've said the question right on there. If I applied analytics to my beer league team, would it force them to start back checking? Which is another great question. Steve, on the play reading part, and I'm sure this is one of the things that we talked obviously about. Hey, keep kids involved, keep it open and everything like that. But obviously, I believe you've obviously worked quite a bit with some of the elite goalies who've come through Team USA. You've worked with the U18s. You've worked with those guys who are the guys and girls between 15, 16, 17, 18, right? How do you evaluate play reading, right? Because that's one of those where you talked about sample size and figuring out point and like not just habits versus one day versus the other, right? Like, so when you kind of look at both first kind of teaching it, but then B, when it comes to evaluating it to try to figure out, hey, this is the kind of kid who's going to be within an elite group. How do you kind of evaluate play reading and get a read on that as you guys figure this out?
Yeah, I'd say early in my career, I would just try and look for things when I was scouting goalies and see maybe do they change their depth when they see someone on the back door trying to change the distance they have to travel? Are they more aggressive when they read shot? Even though there's a backdoor presence, they have read that player is not going to pass the puck based maybe on just player personnel. They know it's Ovechkin and he loves to fire it, and they trust they've done some pre-scouting and they know that, or they know the player on the back door is a defender, maybe not likely to score goals, so maybe they trust they're not going to make the pass back there. So I think early in my career, I made a lot of assumptions. And I think that's something that I've learned along the way, is to never assume. And that's what makes the camp so valuable that I've seen you at in Plymouth a handful of years. The best way that I've been able to identify how well a goalie's reading the play is to talk to them. And that quality time that we get with our top goalies at the National Goalie Camp is a great opportunity for us just to have some discussion on what did you see? Why did you make those decisions? What would you do differently next time? And that's where you can really see the wheels turning. Some goalies are like, I don't know, I'm just out there playing. I'm not really entirely sure why I do what I do. And sometimes that's perfectly fine. And we have some great goalies that do that. But others, you can really tell they watch a lot of hockey. They understand the game. They understand the players. They watch a lot of the other team's players, and they know their personnel, because they'll tell you, well, that's number 14. He's a lefty and he shoots like all the time. I know he's going to shoot that puck. He's a puck hog. Or, I saw that player drive in the back door, and I know that I need to get a little bit deeper. I like to have a little bit of motion to my game when I'm moving laterally. And maybe if even I make the save, there's a rebound and I want to generate a little motion into that rebound save. And all of a sudden they're talking to you about 3 steps down the road, as opposed to, I think the more learning goaltender is watch puck, stop puck. And then the more advanced goalie is doing lots of scanning off the puck. And they understand the hockey game. It's not just stare at the puck at all costs and be very reactive to it. It's understand the game in the neutral zone, and then understand the forecheck when they're dumping the puck in, and really understanding the entire game of hockey so that they can predict what's likely to happen. And what's interesting about that is you hear a lot of goalies that say the NHL is easier to play in than the American League, because when the game is predictable, it's easy for you to make decisions and play read properly. When the game is less predictable, which the lower levels of hockey you play in, the less likely the people are to pull the moves off, even if they want to. And so that adds a lot more broken plays, a lot more decision making where you were reading they were going top glove and they muffined it 5-hole, and your brain's telling you glove all day, but the shot went 5-hole, and now you're trying to do the math on, was my read wrong or did they muffin it? And like that doesn't necessarily happen as often at the higher levels of hockey, so you can trust your reads a little bit better.
When it comes to I was kind of curious on that other front there. So when it comes to, we talked about some of those goalies, those sub 6 foot goalies that have been really good in the NCAA lately. You just talked about kind of the difficulty of playing the AHL versus the NHL. In your mind, when you kind of look at the difference between a goalie making, because I think it used to be, right? Like it used to be 15, 20 years ago, there was a bigger gap, right? Like there was a bigger gap between what an NHL quote unquote starter was and an NHL backup was. And even a bigger gap between them and the AHL goalie. That gap was a little bit more obvious, both probably with physical tools and other things as well. Now those gaps are just so shrunk. So in your view, when you kind of diagnose and look at the difference between an NHL goalie and an AHL goalie, what are those margins now? And like how do you kind of see how that plays out? And you've seen kids obviously work their way up to that, and you've seen like where do those divisions start to come? And when you look at that,
yeah, it seems, like every other sport you watch, when they make it, they're all so good. It's just who can do it consistently. I think it's the mental side of the game that's so challenging for them. I'd say the pace of play is probably a little bit of it. Like I always hear NHL goalie coaches talk about skating. They want their goalies to be able to get there on time, to not be late to pucks, to not be chasing the play. And they got to be consistent from night to night. And I think that's one of the hardest things to learn, no matter what you're doing, is you're going to have days when you didn't sleep very well. You're going to have days when you're not feeling that great because you ate something that didn't go so right with your body. You're fatigued, you're overwhelmed, you're having a tough relationship problem. The best in the world figure out a way to bring it regardless of all those variables that, as we are, not the best in the world, we tend to have excuses on, oh, well, my baby woke up at 3:30 and that's why I didn't bring it tonight. Well, those, the Marty Brodeurs, the Dominic Hosicks, all those goalies that won all those Vezinas and that live in Hall of Fames, they had a lot going on in their life as well, but they figured out a way to be consistent and to turn it all off. And then once the game was over, then they could deal with everything afterwards. So I think that just takes time. But it takes repetitions. And I think that's another area that's improved dramatically, and why that gap is shortened is that historically back then, you'd see Brodeur play 76 games a year and the other goalie play 5. And that was happening across all levels of hockey, where you had one goalie that was taking all the minutes and another goalie that was just a glorified cheerleader. Of course, the gap is going to be massive for these guys when only one of them are getting development opportunities in games. And I think that we've really changed that, where now there's a lot of dual participation for both goalies, which has led for development for both of them. I think some of that is forced due to overuse injuries that we've seen. I think the pace of play has gotten in so fast that it's a lot more taxing on these joints than it ever has been before. I think goalies back in the day used to put their bag in the garage and go play baseball for 3 months and just relax and give their hips a break. And it's now, in today's culture, if you put your goalie bag away, you're not committed. And so we're seeing a lot of goalies that are coming into these leagues already broken down, and it's hard for them to manage a full season because their body's already deteriorated by the time they got to where they needed to be, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so I'm hopeful again that we're going to moderate that in the youth space better, so that we do have athletes that are mentally and physically ready to go when they get called on. But you're already seeing the leagues today. Old school people are getting frustrated with this load management because they like to just see people gut it out. But I think the numbers will show that a prepared body is better than a beaten up body. And it's going to be hard for some to get used to this new era of sport in general, not just goalies, but all bodies are now being treated a little bit differently with all the different things we've learned about over the years. And I think it's going to be better for performance. I think everyone's going to perform a little bit better. Everyone's going to mentally be a little bit healthier. It's going to be overall good, but there are definitely going to be some growing pains that come within that.
I would be remiss. Nope. I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up, and this is going to be my last one because it's the one goaltending technique that it's a 3-letter word that becomes a bad word now on broadcast, and we're talking about the RVH, and that is, and for me it's fascinating to have this conversation. I think 2 days after Jonathan Quick played his final game, because I remember a couple of years back talking to Jonathan Quick how that was actually a technique born out of innovation, because he told me the whole story how the Sedin twins were burning him down low. So it was something that was a
problem solving. He was solving a problem
solving thing that was adopted, copied a little bit too much. So, and I'm saying this because I want to have this here, and it's important for me to talk about this, and maybe Robert and I can then clip it and share it to the world when an RVH goal is scored in the playoffs. When you see that technique and what it's become and everything like that, because it should be a tool in a goalie's bag, where should and shouldn't it be used so we can kind of give that to the uninitiated of where this should be a tool in the bag? Because I think it's gone so far where everyone thinks it's a horrible technique when it actually does have application. So help us teach the people.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm putting my foot in my mouth here, but you bringing up Jonathan Quick and that save selection, when I think of RVH bad goals, which again, it gets put on Twitter immediately and everybody loves to talk about it, and there's a counter on how many go in a year, I don't envision Jonathan Quick being the one that's letting them in, and then that speaks to it. He had an intentional time in a game that he uses that save selection based on a read, based on a decision that he was trying to solve a problem for. The problem was a lot of people then assumed what the solution was and why they were using it, and now we're overusing this decision. The other problem is everyone's decision is going to be different based on their size, based on their skating ability, based on their play reading ability. So it can't just be get into it when a puck's in a certain spot, because that spot's going to be different for each and every one of us. And so that's, again, comes back to this decision-making process and this autonomy that we want our goalies to have. When I work with our goaltenders, when I was with our Olympic team in the 2022 games, we talked about the RVH with all 3 of our goalies. They were all different heights. They all had different strengths. They all had different weaknesses. And so I would use an ice marker and I would draw zones on the ice and see where they felt comfortable that they could make the save in that save selection. So typically people like the RVH because it allows you to move freely to the weak side of the ice, where people were using the VH for a while, which was the opposite, where that post knee was up and then the other leg was down, and they were seeing some rebound issues and they weren't feeling like they were able to get to the weak side of the ice as efficiently. You'd see the overlap as another save selection that was used, or just standing upright like you used to see in the 1980s goalies. But they were finding that when that puck did get to the weak side of the ice and it was in tight, it was hard for them to make that save. So the RVH was a solution on, okay, I can seal the strong side of the ice, but if the puck does get low and across, I can explosively still seal the low part of the ice. So that's the benefit. That's why goalies like to use it. The risk is that if you're a smaller goalie, or depending on your execution of the save selection, you do have spots by your ear and by your shoulder that NHL players have learned to pick. So you've seen those players shooting it off the side of the head and in, and picking corners on goalies. And so that's where I wanted to make sure that our goalies knew, okay, with your size and your execution of the RVH, where can that puck not go in from? So that just the geometry of the net and the angles that the puck has, it's either going to hit you or it's going to go over the net. And then that's your frame to work within. So now if you see the puck enter that area, you can get into your RVH and you can do it confidently because that puck's either going to hit you or it's going to miss the net. You don't even have to think. That's where you can feel comfortable in this position, making a blocking save. And then you have the benefit of the low side cross, whether it's a rebound or a pass. Now you also know you can explosively get to that weak side of the ice. But now the challenging part was, well, now what do I do on a puck that's just outside that zone? Because now they have the ability to pick a corner, and that's where you have to make your read. And that's what makes life tough. And I think the best goal scorers in the world, I would always encourage goal scorers, go to goalie clinics. Because if you're learning the decision-making a goalie's making, now you understand that if you bring that puck just an inch over, now they have to make a decision. If you leave it here, they don't have to make a decision because they know they're going to stop it. But you move it 1 inch, and now they've got to start going, shoot, do I stay up? Do I get down? Do I go into an RVH? Do I get on my feet? That's what makes goaltending hard, is when you make a play right at one of those decision-making spots, and now you catch them off guard, that's when those goals go in that are on Twitter, because the goalie's in this indecision on, do I do this or do I do that? And you shoot it, and now all of a sudden it goes in and it's weird, and it looks like, why this NHL goalie let in a soft goal? When the reality is, it was just taken in a very challenging spot of the ice based on decisions that goalies like to make. The goal scorers that know those decision spots, oftentimes by talking to their goalie coaches and learning about what goalies are trying to do, can benefit from them. Other people just get lucky and they just happen to shoot the puck they were going to shoot no matter what. It just happens to be in a transition spot and they didn't even know it. So I think bringing some clarity to the goalie's size and their strengths is important. And then just having them work through it, getting some reps, learning from their mistakes, being intentional with it. A lot of goalies don't even think about their previous goals, so they never learn from those mistakes, and they could keep doing the same thing over and over again. We want to make sure that, again, we're looking for patterns, and then we're building some strategy in our practice design to give them repetitions in those situations that they don't feel comfortable in. So then when it's game time and that situation arises, we've done so many repetitions of that same situation in practice where you know what to do. And at least if it goes in, it was an execution problem, but it was not indecision. Because I think we can all get okay. We're okay with, we just made the wrong read and we live and die by our decisions. That's a lot better for me as a goalie coach to hear than, I don't know, I'm just out there just trying to get hit with a puck and I can't, that to me tells me you're not thinking a whole lot. We're not making decisions. We're just blocking. If you have a method to the madness and you made the wrong read, or the other player just made a hell of a shot, sometimes we got to give credit to the players too on making great reads of their own.
I really appreciate that language of talking about execution in terms of when a goal goes in, because we talk so often about, the techniques of shot blocking or receiving a pass or settling a puck down or shooting. But, players miss what the best players are shooting, like 15% or something, maybe 20 if they're really on a heater. Whereas goalies, they get 9 out of 10 or 15, 18, 19 out of 20, but we focus on that one and we assume that's because of some clear mechanical error, predisposition or indecision or whatever. So Steve, I've really appreciated you being on here, and I've learned a lot personally, and hopefully y'all continue to help everyone to kind of change and educate people about the conversation in terms of goaltending, because I think we could stand to learn a lot more about what underlies the execution, because at the end of the day, they're athletes just like anyone else. Their position could stand to be understood better than I think it oftentimes is. So I really appreciate coming on here and teaching us all a few things.
Thank you for having me. It needs to be heard. People need to understand about the position to want to play it. And I think if you look to every Olympic gold medal we've ever won in this country, it has been on the back of a goaltender that has played incredible. And what an opportunity, if you're a parent out there, wouldn't it be cool to have your child be the one that the whole nation's leaning on? If you are the goalie, if you're the athlete, what a great responsibility that would be, to be the Connor Hellebuck or the Aaron Frankel or the Matty Rooney, or, like the Jim Craig. Every time, again, we've got that gold medal around our neck, it's been because the Jack McCartans made 80 saves over 2 games and the other teams outplayed us. And the reality is we've yet to win a gold medal when we were the quote unquote best team on the ice that night. I'd say our women's team was probably the better team overall, and we've shown that consistently throughout the year. But I would argue that they still played a better overall 60 minutes in the gold medal game. We got it done, thankfully, but it wasn't pretty. And our men's team, certainly, we got it done, which is the end result we needed. But I don't know if, we're in a spot right now to win a gold medal without our goaltender being the star player. And what a great opportunity that is for all the Americans out there who want to be a star player on a big tournament, a big scene.
Well, thanks again, Steve. Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, hopefully we've all learned something, a few somethings actually. So appreciate you. And, we'll have to have you on again at some point, I think, because there's always a lot more about goaltending we could all stand to learn.
Please, thank you. Anytime. And any listeners, if you have any questions, if you want to get involved in goaltending or you want to learn more, just email me at steve.thompson@usahockey.org and we'll get you looked after and get you in net.
There he goes. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate your time. Sean, I don't know about you, but I do know about you. You're a person, but we could all stand to, I think, hear a little bit more about what execution looks like and what goes into all of that, because there's so much that, I don't understand it, and I watch a fair amount of hockey. So if I'm learning something, then I have to think a lot of people probably can too.
Yeah, that was I really loved that conversation. And once again, thank you very much to Steve for coming on. That was awesome. really thrilled when he was to join us, and it was just a really enlightening conversation for me. And I've talked to Steve quite a bit before, so that was awesome. So
I'm glad you mentioned that last part too about USA Hockey, because it does grate on me a little bit how much love Jack Hughes has gotten for scoring that goal when Connor Hellebuyck clearly won that game for the US. Clearly.
Yeah.
And frankly, he gave him a chance to win at Four Nations too, easily.
Mm-hmm.
Like Hellebuyck was great then. But that's the nature of goaltending is, well, whatever. I'm not going to be the one who defends goalies. That's your job. But I do have a lot of sympathy for him. Because they're so underappreciated and misunderstood. So we could all stand to understand a little bit more. And yeah, like Steve said, feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions about maybe you have a goaltender in your life who's learning and coming along.
Yeah, that was the other thing I really liked about another thing that I thought that was awesome about the context and connection of things. I think there's it's how this position connects down to there's the way you look at the position like from the 8U popping the pads on a kid in net to what the goal is for that kid versus the 15-year-old trying to make a AAA team versus the kid who's trying to make a USHL team to making a college hockey team, like that stuff too. I think that was, I loved that kind of deep look at it all. And I also, one of the things I really appreciate about the way Steve looks at things, and we didn't even talk enough about it, but you heard him talk about it in Frankel. Steve works with both the men's and women's goalies for USA Hockey. And one of the things that I know, just having seen his camp before, he has them work together because there are different ways the game is played, the men's and women's game are played. Mm-hmm. And there's different elements and approaches for both that a men's goalie can steal from a women's goalie and vice versa. And I really appreciate the way Steve looks at all that stuff. And that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up because we talked for so long. We obviously can't go through everything, but that's another thing that I just really appreciate about his perspective on things.
Yeah, there's, the RVH is such a great way to kind of put a pin in it or put an exclamation mark, I guess, on that conversation, because there's so many times, and I've been guilty of it too, where a goal goes in, you immediately say, why? And well, you start at the last point it was before it went in the net, which is right next to the goalie somewhere, usually if the goalie's in the net. And what could have been done differently there? But so often the play reading he talks about is what actually set the goalie up in the first place. And I know you've talked about it a lot too, about Connor Hellebuyck, who we mentioned is an elite play reader, and he makes a lot of those boring saves because he reads the play so well. He's in the right spot. And I think even how goalies are perceived as big or quick or athletic, these terms that kind of get thrown around, when the reality is any goalie in the NHL nowadays is extremely athletic. You have to be to play that position. There's a reason they're all covered in sweat at the end of every night. They're working so hard. They're effectively doing like their own yoga workout in a lot of ways, just with how tense they have to be and how much they have to be thinking about and concentrating on. So to spend some time actually learning about how you break all those down into kind of the fundamental building blocks and talk about them, what you focus on, and we should say what you don't focus on, and where he wants to kind of pull back and say, okay, I'm not going to get all over a guy just because, his glove was a little slow this night or he wasn't in the right spot this night. Like, look at trends and try to look at the big picture.
It's also a good point that just an observation, and you talk about one of the things you talked about, how when you go and you rework things as a pro athlete, sometimes things aren't going to, there's going to be not positions of, there's going to be issues that don't work, right? There's going to be, when you change things. And I think that's a really good point to remember, where sometimes you're watching stuff within the window of an NHL season, right? And as a goalie coach and a goalie, where is the bandwidth to go and rework something? Like, if you're not the quote unquote starter with the $8 million contract, do you really have the in-season window to work on it? I think that's another important.
Yeah, for your one start every 2 weeks or whatever, are you really going to say, okay, I've changed something in my game? Yeah, you let in one goal and everyone's going to be all over you, or they're going to be looking at the third goalie.
Yeah, and it's I think that's a big thing, and I think it's also, I really like obviously there is the part of the pushback and kind of the where this will all go is the size thing is decisions are made ultimately by, not necessarily by people, goaltending decisions, while they listen to their goalie scouts and their goalie coaches and everything, ultimately at the end of the day, who's in net falls on the GM and the head coach. Right. And I think that's an important note here. Right. And so unless you're an organization that is truly open-minded to some of the things Steve talked about, you're going to continue to run into a lot of that problem of, well, must be tall, can't be small. Right. And like, I think that's
it's the goalie version of like defensemen on a lot of teams, right? Like my defensemen have to be a certain type, physicality or positioning or tall or whatever it is. You start typecasting people for goal.
It's interesting to think about from the level of like, because I was randomly thinking about this from the perspective of, you look at stuff differently kind of from the perspective as a parent, right? So like I have a son who has started to play and really enjoys it and enjoys playing hockey. It's just learned to play and everyone's playing and everything like that. And he's not a big kid. And so there's the level though of, even though I'm not pretending or going and thinking in my head, hey, he's a future NHL goalie, right? Like I'm not like that's, but because of this kind of way we've gotten to the nature of how the position has been typecast of, hey, it's the big kid, it's the big kid, it's the big kid. Like, I think we have to push back on that. And this is a great segue for one of the other things we wanted to talk about, where this past weekend in Vegas for the Frozen Four, 3 of the 4 starting goalies for the Frozen Four teams are sub 6 foot. And obviously we mentioned on when Steve was on as well, but I think it's worth bringing up where you look at the goalie for Denver, Johnny Hicks, who is 5'10", probably 155 pounds, soaking wet, right? And is obviously explosive and quick and everything like that, and a very reflex-based goaltender. But Steve talked all about the play reading. And if you watch that game and you look at the nature of how are you in the position to make that sprawling pad save? How are you able to do it? Looks, the reflex is part of it. Like, let's not pretend that it's not. Like, the reflexes
They're
are
elite
part
athletes.
of it.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
but how are you in the best position to be reflexive, right? Like, and I think that's an important thing we should look at. And it's
we talked about this with Jack last week, right? About how you make them do the work. And in a weird way, as a goalie, you're doing the same thing. If your positioning and play reading is really good, you force the shooter or the playmaker to do the work of trying to hit a tiny hole or trying to make a tiny pass, through a lot of traffic or hit a tiny spot, because you've done everything to force them to do the hard work. Yeah.
I think that's, like, think about when it's obviously a lot of our audience will think about Jake Ottinger and everything like that. When you think about Jake's game, and I know Jake's game has come under fire a little bit at times this year, right? There's been some mixed reviews. Think about his game when it's at its best. And it's that for Jake, I think it's highly based on swagger and confidence. I think that is part of Jake's.
He was who I was thinking of with the blocker. Like when his blocker is on, I feel like that's his game is on that night too.
Yeah. And it's so when he has part of that, but then also part of it is Jake's play reading is very good, right? Like, is it at a Connor Hellebuck level? Probably not. But there's when you see his game at that level, it really takes the next step. And it's actually, I was really happy we did this with Steve, because I've struggled to sometimes quantify and qualify to people what makes Trey Augustine good, right? And obviously, for those who don't know, Trey Augustine was the goalie at Michigan State the past 3 years, the Mike Richter Award winner this year, Red Wings prospect, and the goalie who was the goalie in net for the 2 years the U.S. won back-to-back World Junior Gold medals. And Trey's game is not very flashy. It's not very exciting. It's the technical side of it is. He's a 6'1", 6'2", depending on what his height is listed at, doesn't fit that kind of mold where you're like, oh, that's an NHL goalie when you look at just him play. He's solid and smooth and everything. But when Steve talks about the play reading and he talks about the way goalies can follow and react, I think that gives a really good perspective for why. For a long time, Robert, I thought you would kind of compare goalies to maybe goalies from other sports. And I don't know if that's actually the best way to do it. I think it sometimes fits better to you probably look at a elite goaltender the way you should probably look at an elite goaltender the way you look at in baseball, probably a center fielder, right? Where someone who you think about an elite center fielder, the play reading off the bat, off the ball, the timing, they're not that exciting. Or to use another sport in soccer, like a center back, right? Someone who's controlling things. And I think that's a good way to look at.
I was thinking in football as an offensive lineman, even.
Yes.
Because you have to protect something, right? It's passive by nature. You can change your positioning, you can change your height and stance in certain ways. And it's the defensive lineman, I guess, or whoever. It's their job to beat you, to get you off balance, to get you leaning the wrong way so that they can get just one half step on you. So you have to be reactive, right? You have to have those elite reflexes, but it's also about positioning. There's some size, but obviously football, there's size is a bit bigger element. It's literally brute strength, but center field, there's definitely an element there that makes a lot of sense. And that's where it's cool to see goalies who aren't necessarily as big still playing well and doing great things and winning big games like you got to see firsthand. And I do think, some of the ways Steve was talking about it, the narrative about really crazy saves, I wish we would be more out and out positive about those. I wish broadcasters wouldn't always feel the need to be like, well, that's unorthodox, but it got the job done. Like, no, if he reaches back and makes a stick save, that's incredible, full stop. We should be talking about any save, frankly, as remarkable, and especially the ones where maybe the goalie is out of position. But if they made the save, they made the save. Marc-Andre Fleury, right? He won some cups. Even Jonathan Quick won some cups playing some unorthodox hockey at times. Even with the RVH in his game, Jonathan Quick definitely was still an aggressive goalie who did some things most goalies don't do. Even Scott Wedgwood, who's having an incredible year with the Avalanche and probably will have some pretty big games in the postseason. He's a goalie who can get a little interesting too. He's not a super technical goalie, and he's, I think, 6'2", something like that. So still big-ish, but he's not one of these 6'5" guys. So I just think that's cool, and we should talk about those things in more glowing terms than just, that's kind of a fun novelty that they did that. Thanks for letting me be on that soapbox for a minute.
No, I love it. I love it. I also think it should be the level of. There's so many things I think we kind of fight against the narrative of what exists, and we should push back against it, right? So let's use the Johnny Hicks example, obviously, since he's the Denver goalie that just won a national title. Tremendous story. And I think so much of the narrative sometimes about his success sometimes comes with the vibe of, well, that's great. What a great college hockey goalie story. Why does that have to just be a college hockey story, right? And I think that's a really good kind of thing to look at it for this. I also, just from my own personal experience and looking at the sport and everything like that, I think, and I won't name names on things, but broadcasts should have people like Steve on as opposed to some people who break down and officials. I'd rather the budget for NHL broadcasts go to having someone why don't we have ESPN or Turner during the playoffs have a goaltending expert actually they don't have to be in the booth. They can be at home because we do it with the rules and analysis. I think that would kind of demystify a bunch of the position, because I feel like we've had that. Sure,
like Brian Boucher a lot of times is on, so he can talk about it.
But they're doing the whole game. They're doing the whole game, right? So Brian Boucher's job is to do the whole game, and that's fine. There's a lot of former goalies who work in broadcasting, but I think a lot of them push back against just the goalie specific thing because they're trying to show I'm more than just a former goalie. I'm a great broadcaster. Yep. Obviously Daryl Ray is obviously the Hall of Fame analyst in Dallas, right? Daryl knows how goaltending works and is around the team all the time. Daryl's job is to break the full game down. Mm-hmm. And I don't think this is something you could do at an individual team level for a broadcast, but from a national broadcast perspective, wouldn't it be great to be like, you know what? Hey, our analyst. So let's go with so the TNT.
Tuukka Rask was on the TNT panel.
Exactly, but not on the panel even. Not even on the panel.
No, I know you're talking about in-game, like talking head in-game.
In-game of like, you know what? Our analyst is great, and they're great at breaking the game down, but they're not going to be properly going to be able to tell me why a goalie made this save selection. So it's definitely a
well, you know, you need what you should. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I know in some other sports in the playoffs, commercial breaks go for longer. I'm trying to remember if that's the case in the Stanley Cup playoffs or not. If the commercial break actually goes, I think in baseball it goes from like 2 minutes to 3 minutes or something like that between innings.
Yeah, I think it might go to 2. I think it might go up by 30 seconds, but I don't know that. I don't know.
I think we should, if I were the czar, I would definitely say let's have another 30 seconds after a goal is scored to do.
Oh my God, yes,
like that.
Yes.
First of all, more replays. There's usually time for 2, maybe 3 max replays for a goal, and there might be 2 or 3 goals in the whole game, maybe even 1 for some playoff games, right? If there were more time, you could do things exactly like that, where you have the goaltending expert, you have the the breakdown, the play, the play-by-play guy makes his call, the color analyst says what they think. But then you have the goalie analyst who can come in. Maybe not every goal. Some goals won't need it, but especially goals where there's something interesting to add, you have that person there on standby. And again, like you said, if you got the budget for a referee who sometimes it's a tough spot, and you can tell former officials tend to be reticent to criticize other officials because there's such a brotherhood there, because officials get criticized so much. It makes sense they'd be a little bit defensive and kind of show that camaraderie. But with goaltending, I think there's a lot of goalies that would love to explain exactly like you were saying. Like Steve would be a great person to have on and say, okay, yeah, this is an execution thing. This is what he's trying to do. This is what didn't work, or this is what he could have done. But instead, it tends to be simplified because it has to be, because you only have 15 seconds to do and say something.
It is way too short after a goal. That is definitely an important thing that kind of goes through on that. Yeah, it's obviously that was a great guest for me. I really loved being able to nerd out with Steve about that. He's always been really great and that's the type of stuff we want to talk about on the show. I want to if our crack producer,
you have a soapbox of your own, I think, that our producer said that you want to hop on here.
Yeah, we got lots of soapboxes, but like
it's true.
Our crack.
We buy a lot of soap.
Yeah, if our crack producer has lined up everything right, we should have our next guest in about 8 minutes or so. So I want to get through some of these other things that we had mentioned on our pre-show meeting before we go. We'd mentioned mentioned Denver winning the national title, and we had David Carl, obviously 3 titles in 5 years at Denver, 2 World Junior gold medals, only 36 years old, and someone who, it's kind of funny. Yes, I see Ardell in the comments. That is the bit. We are to Ardell in the comments. We are our own producers.
Well, it's helpful to have someone to blame when something goes
exactly.
wrong.
Exactly.
So I prefer to blame the producer rather than
exactly.
Your
it
wonderful
is
hosts.
exactly. But so Denver wins, and it's and we've entered now the spot of Denver wins on Saturday. The portal system opens up this week, and they have until April 28th, and hundreds and hundreds of players in the portal. And this is not just a college hockey thing, with obviously with the new age of athlete movement for within and everything like that. But I was thinking about this, and I wanted to talk to you about this from a fascination standpoint, Robert, because at what point if you're recruiting in college hockey, right, and you're at a smaller school, and I want to be clear, a smaller hockey school, like Denver is a smaller school, but it is a hockey's gold standard, right? Like a smaller hockey school. We're talking about like a place like I went, that's a Bowling Green of the world, or you're talking about the RITs, the RITs of the world. You're talking about those level programs. At what point does your recruiting pitch, probably externally, because I bet internally stuff like this has already happened, but at what point with this new kind of transfer portal age is part of your pitch become, hey, come here for a year or two to prove you can move to the Big Ten or the NCHC or Hockey East, right? Like at what point do the haves and have-nots completely redefine their expectations more publicly of, hey, it's about winning. Everyone says they want to win a national championship. That's fine. But the reality is the NCHC has won 8 of the last 10 titles. And now if you're a player and you want to win, it's not a bad idea to go to a Merrimack. Obviously, that's you go to Merrimack or a Minnesota State or one of those programs, and then use that to parlay it into a larger program. And I don't know if that's good or bad, right? I don't know, and I just wanted to throw that idea out to you to kind of chat it out a bit.
Well, this came up for me. I really started thinking about this more because I didn't go to a school that had a hockey program, so. This is something that I've kind of learned about secondhand over the years, and I'm still learning a lot about. But I was talking to Artem Schlein in training camp before the season started, who plays in the AHL for the Texas Stars, who was signed as a college free agent. And he started his college career at UConn, then went for 2 years, then went to Northern Michigan, and then got a 5th year because one of his seasons was affected by COVID. So he was allowed to come back and do another year. And then he went to ASU for that 5th year. So he went to 3 different places in his undergrad in his time playing college hockey. And in his situation, it was less, it wasn't quite a Gavin McKenna situation of go to the highest bidder. It was more about what the best fit was for him and what was going to set him up for success. So I'm a little sympathetic to, look, I think a lot of people have strong feelings about the transfer portal, and I think it stinks for fans because you get attached to a team or a player and they're gone the next year. You see it in a lot of different sports. Right now, Frozen 4 just wrapped up, right? So certainly it's been the talk in hockey as well. I'm sympathetic to how it can allow players to find a program that might better fit them, especially in college. Like, those are pretty critical development years for a lot of players too. So if you're 22, 23, and you're realizing, you know what, this isn't the best program for me, if you have a chance to be able to go somewhere else, I like the idea that players have that freedom. But I do think that it's a weird spot for those smaller, especially the independent programs, like you mentioned, to be in, because now they're purely viewed as, maybe not purely, but for a lot of players, they're just a means to an end. And it doesn't feel sustainable to me, I guess. I'll leave it at that. It doesn't feel sustainable because ultimately, who's really happy with that arrangement when you're there for one year just because you're waiting for your shot somewhere else? I mean, it feels a little bit like the way Tampa Bay would use players in baseball, where, you're here, but as soon as you get expensive, we're selling you somewhere else for some other young prospects going to refresh it. And I don't know, I don't go to any of those schools, right? So maybe they feel differently if that's part of your kind of ethos as a school and as a program. But what do you think? Do you think those programs, I mean, you were talking to a lot of people in the college hockey world. Do you think people at those schools are okay with that if it means they still get some players coming in that might not otherwise come there, even if they're not viewed as a big fish?
I mean, it's tough. The thing for me is it's tough where, like, I think Denver is the outlier, right? Like, David Carl said it at the podium afterwards, like, Denver should be celebrated, small school, puts a lot of money into hockey. But the reality is, I don't know how many more Denvers you can create. And I think that's the kind of spot where we sometimes have the outlier to the rule of outlier that sometimes people think that's the rule. Speaking of college hockey, our next guest is actually going to come on, someone who played some college hockey, but we're having him on for other reasons as well. And I'm very excited. If you have watched a Utah Mammoth game this year, you've probably heard his voice. If he's probably seen his work on national TV in the past. And if you happen to watch any NHL for a while, he played about 900 games in the league or more. So I'm very excited to bring on Dominic Moore here as our producer figures out getting that onto the screen.
What's up, guys? Hello. How's everybody doing?
Hey, Dom.
Good to see you guys.
Thanks for joining us, Dom. Okay, quick question before we start. Vegas or Edmonton?
I'm gonna say a lot of people are saying they'd rather have Vegas. Not within our organization, but if you hear the pundits talking and they're lining up Mammoth matchups that they think would be the best for the Mammoth, I think a lot of people would say Vegas. But here's my counter argument. Vegas is red hot, and John Tortorella is lit a fire under them. I still feel like they've got the unbelievable discipline and defensive systems that Cassidy brought into play, but they're just playing a little bit freer, a little bit more aggressive. So I think they're a ultra dangerous team. So pick your poison between them and Connor McDavid. I don't think there's any easy matchup.
You've got you played for Torts, right?
You know what, Sean? I missed him.
Okay, you did. You did.
I came to New York.
Yeah.
I came to New York just after he was there. I had Alain Vigneault.
Yeah.
However, obviously crossed paths with Torts many times over the years, and he's one of the coaches I wish I had. I just feel like I would have thrived under a guy like him. Tough but fair. I've always enjoyed being around him, and I think it's really interesting too when you look at Torts in his situation he's in right now. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised because the last 3 stops he's had have been rebuilds and young teams with under-talented teams that he's had them overachieving. This is territory that we haven't seen him in a long time. So I wouldn't sleep on Vegas and on John Tortorella.
Speaking of coaches who came in a little late to the party, we were week with us, and he had some pretty frank words.
Robert, our producer muted you by mistake, so you got to rephrase the question. Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. I was going to say, Dom, Rick Bowness was on the show last week, and he had some pretty frank words yesterday about his team. I'm curious, why do you think it was? Again, he was there longer, right, in Columbus, whereas Torts came in very late to the party. Do you think it's just a timing thing? He certainly had a very big bump when he got there too. Did you have an experience ever as a player? Have you ever seen in any capacity a coach come in and the message work for a little bit and not in such a short span of time? Or is it the message? Is it all the players? How do you view something like that? Because it's really fascinating when you look at the 2 halves of Rick Bowness's arrival there. Everything was great, and then everything wasn't working.
Yeah. First of all, I just have a ton of respect for the passion that a guy like that has. And you see at this stage in his career, he's pretty much retired, and to come back and put so much passion into it. I just love seeing that emotion come out. And who knows, like I can't say I followed Columbus enough to comment on where I think things went wrong in the last couple of weeks for them. I think Rick Bowness does a terrific job. In terms of like those bumps, I mean, when I was in Boston, we had Claude Julien, Hall of Fame coach, and he was relieved of his duties about halfway through. And then when Bruce Cassidy came in, we took off. I think we might have had the best record in the league in the second half. Sometimes it's a matter of like balancing things out, and maybe Claude was really good with just some of his experience and understanding the veterans and, calming presence. But maybe the game had evolved to a point where Bruce Cassidy's systems and style of play and defensive structure was what we needed at that time. And so like both of those things meshed well for a short time together. And it happens the other way around where, you have a guy that's a drill sergeant and really systems oriented, discipline oriented, like Cassidy was. And then he gets relieved and Montgomery comes in, who's more positive and, let everybody play. And it this like perfect balance stays for a while, and then it fades as it did with Montgomery at the end of the Boston time. So that's my theory on that.
One thing that you can speak to is hockey in Utah now. You've gotten to be part of the broadcast there and the Mammoth kind of the growth of both the NHL team coming there and then obviously the growth of there. And so there's this is a 2-parter. First, what's it been like? What's hockey in Utah been like, and what does that kind of definition look like for you now that you've been kind of part of it for a little bit? And then 2, there's going to be some playoff hockey in Salt Lake City, I guess, probably Tuesday or Thursday next week, depending on whenever Game 3 will be at home. What's it been like to kind of watch what the Mammoth have done on the ice? So first, let's go to the community first, then we'll talk about what that building's going to be like.
So, gosh, everything for me personally, everything happened pretty fast. They got the team, all that started to come down the pipe in April. Just mind like warp speed with the way that the Utah, organization embraced it, ran with it, tackled everything that came their way. I mean, someday, I mean, we're still kind of in it, but someday people are going to look back and write books about what the Utah Mammoth and Smith Entertainment Group accomplished in such a short period of time, getting an NHL team up and running that quickly, relocating all these people, birthing a franchise, renovating an arena, building a practice rink. Like, the list goes on and on. There's dozens and dozens of things that were just created out of thin air by a group of amazing, hardworking, talented people in such a short time, including the community stuff. I mean, all of a sudden, you get a team in a market where hockey people know the sport, but for a lot of people, it's new. There are some rinks around, but not enough rinks around. There's some participation, but not enough participation. And all of a sudden, we're seeing this momentum build in all of those areas. First of all, at the Delta Center for the games, I mean, the team has been received beyond anyone's wildest imagination. The crowds and the way that they embrace the game, not only in their attendance, but if you come to the arena and you see the way they engage in the game, it blows people away. And then we're starting to see more and more of the community embrace, participation, whether it's the learn to play or adult leagues, even things like that. People are signing up in droves and coming to the Utah Mammoth Ice Center, where the team practices. It's going to be kind of the hotbed and the headquarters of hockey for the state. But I know, knowing this organization, they have massive goals and ambitions that this is only scratching the surface about. Second part of the question, playoff hockey in Salt Lake City, equally mind-boggling. I mean, listen, this is a team that, year two, their goal was to make the playoffs. But you look at the youth of the team and some of their most important players, Cooley, Gunther. These guys are, Gunther, he's 22 this whole season, just turned 23 last week. Cooley, younger than Gunther. So to have a team perform that well, they had some adversity. They Cooley missed a good chunk of time of the season. Nick Schmaltz stepped in, played a key role, playing center for most of the season. Really an impressive accomplishment to get this team in the playoffs. And now this community is just completely in a frenzy over this team.
On a personal level, what was your transition to broadcasting like? Because you see a lot in the hockey world and in a lot of sports where you need that perspective of someone who's been on the inside and can kind of explain things to folks on the outside and help them kind of understand why we're seeing what we're seeing. But I'd imagine that transition also comes with a lot of things that people don't see before you get to that point, before the cameras and the mics are on. So I'd be curious to hear a little bit about you, a long career in the NHL, and what it was like for you about both the decision to move into broadcasting and what that all looked like for you.
Yeah, to be honest, I never thought I would get into broadcasting. I stopped playing, took a year off. We had our first child, was just kind of weighing which direction to go with things. I had a bunch of different directions I thought I might go, and was given an opportunity coming during COVID, basically, with NBC. Full gratitude to John McGinnis, who was the executive producer at NBC at the time. And they just brought me in for one day and, in the studio, and said, oh, okay. After that, they invited me back the next week. And then after that, they invited me back to call a game. I called my first game with Kenny Albert, who I had gotten a great relationship with during my time in New York as a player. And so it was a great thrill to work alongside Kenny and end up calling 2 rounds of playoffs for NBC in the bubble. Shame that NBC lost the rights right after that season. A big game of musical chairs. And end up getting an opportunity to join ESPN's crew and was with ESPN for 2 years before stepping away from them. Just to travel with a young family for me got to be a little bit too demanding at that time. And then the opportunity to join Utah came up, and just the vision of Ryan and Ashley Smith and the organization, and the leadership of Chris Armstrong, everything became very evident that this was an organization that was unique. And as a guy that played for 10 organizations during my career, when you see a unique, organization, you realize how valuable it is, and couldn't pass up on that opportunity. And in my role here, I think, one of my strengths is just being able to, whether it's a fan that's watched their entire life, and is, you would call, a hockey lifer, played at any level or at high level, whether it's that kind of fan or whether it's a complete new fan who's never watched the game before. I feel like what I can do and what I do best is being able to give them something they've never heard before, or share my love for the game, or teach them something that they'll come away with, wow, that was awesome. I was entertained, I was educated, whatever it might be. That to me is a gift, to be able to play that role here in this market and be a part of something from the ground up as well.
With Utah, I got another follow up too, but first one I want to talk about.
I can't hear Sean.
Nope. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me now? We good?
I can hear you, Sean.
I can't hear either of you guys, actually, unfortunately.
Guessing that the audio on that end might be.
Nope, might be the headphone.
Yeah. So, yep.
Yep,
we got an audio issue.
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear Dom here. I guess
you can hear me.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna mute Dom. I'll message him really quickly.
Everyone gets to see the back end production as we go. That's the.
Yeah. So.
Not anymore. No.
I'll
tell him to hold on.
Okay. So I'm not sure. You can try. This is fun doing sound engineering on the fly.
Yes, exactly. Live sound engineering.
Yeah. So. Yeah, Dom's gonna pop off and try to hop back on.
Copy that. Cool.
Yes, I will say that this is the life. I love this stuff. You're figuring it out on the fly. Figured it out with the last guest. Something else with the next guest. This is great.
We are learning. We are definitely learning. This is the. I'll let you add him to the stage. You add him back to the stage.
Let me add Dom back here.
Back end production on the front end.
Okay, can you hear us, Dom? Is that going okay? Okay,
no,
looks good here. Okay, thanks,
here
Sean, hit him.
Here we go. All right, I was gonna say, as you said, you played for 10 organizations. You got a really good cut across the league of everything, and obviously we've heard so many great stories about what Ryan and Ashley Smith have done with Utah. When it comes to just from an ownership perspective, as someone who's there, boots on the ground day to day, what is kind of, for lack of a better word, why are they like? Why is an owner able to do that and be able to connect with everything? Because there's other places where the owners don't do that.
Yeah, that's a question that could have a long answer. I'll do my best to do it justice. Let's start with the fact that, number one, Ryan and Ashley Smith care about Utah. They're coming at the place of owning a team and being, they call it stewards of the team, from a place of, this is not for them, this is for the community. They say that, and a lot of people can say something like that, but it's very evident they back it up. Everything they do backs it up, and beyond that, everything they say, they exceed those expectations. Not only do they meet them, they exceed them. I think Ryan is a guy that cares. He wants to succeed at everything he does. He's passionate, and then he has this perfect balance of being involved enough, but also getting the right people on the bus and letting them do their thing. I think that too much in either direction the wrong way can mess things up. And I think he strikes that balance really well. He's hired great people, but he's also not just completely, hands off. He wants to be involved. He wants to be in the loop, and I think that's fabulous. And yeah, I mean, I just think that Utah is also a pretty unique place. Like, it's a place where, you know, there's people get along, whether it's the cooperation between Smith Entertainment Group and the various levels of government that need to exist to move things along, whether it be the arena renovations or the practice rink in Sandy, or even things like the Olympic Games. Like, there's a level of organization and cooperation and collaboration that exists here that I think is pretty unique.
And then my other follow-up from an earlier question was, so you had the unique entry point of a lot of people who get in broadcast, start local, go national, right? Like, so there's a lot of people where you have the unique entry point of, you kind of started with that national opportunity, have now worked for a team and kind of with the covering one team. So you go from kind of parachuting in to getting to see the whole story of a team from game one to, unfortunately, the local broadcasters only get round one of the playoffs, but you'll get to watch past that. What's kind of been your experience, and kind of as you look at the different, I guess, responsibilities and approach as a broadcaster when you go from that national guy kind of parachuting in to, I get to tell this team's story and be part of the story from preseason till through the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, when you're on the local side, particularly, with my role here in Utah, where I've been a part of it from the very beginning, right? It's such a different thing because you get to tell the story from literally the inaugural game, moving forward to our first playoff berth about to happen. So that's an honor to be able to bring that into people's homes and tell the story with our broadcast group the way we feel like it should be told. And it's, as much as I enjoyed the national broadcast side, in a sense that you get to share your love of the game, which is a big part of why I enjoy doing what I do, and teaching the game there too. There's more of a sense of a team with being, with the Utah Mammoth. We have a core group of our broadcast team that's with each other day in and day out, at practices, at games, on the road, traveling. So you develop the same kind of chemistry that you would have, with a hockey team as a player. And, those relationships not only are rewarding, but they're rewarding in terms of the product you put on the air. It's different. It's definitely different over time. On the national side, you develop those kinds of relationships as well. And I still have great relationships with all, dozens of people that I worked with at NBC and ESPN, but the crews switch up a lot, right? You get different people in the truck every week. You're worth a different partner every week. It changes a lot, and you don't have that consistency, which I think, again, there's trade-offs to it all, but I'm really loving what I'm doing at the moment.
Okay. Well, I have two questions, but the first one is pretty basic. When it comes to the playoffs, you as a player, you played a lot of postseason games. When you get to games 81, 82, how much would you have preferred to shut it down and just get some rest? I mean, the season is already, most players I talk to tend to say it feels like it's too long just because of what a grind it is. And then you get to playoffs and you're supposed to amp it up somehow with whatever you got left in the tank. Would you have preferred as a player to shut it down for a week or 2 weeks if you could have? Or were you one who just wanted to, you know what, I want to stay sharp. I want to stay on my game, put me in game 82 and I'll pick up right where I left off a couple days later in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, was asked this question the other day, given where Utah was at, and in my experience, when we won the President's Trophy in New York, I was one of the veteran guys that was offered a chance to rest down the stretch, and I didn't want to. I think it's very personal preference. Maybe if you're dinged up a little bit and that rest is going to be valuable, sure. For me, I just a creature of habit. Preparation and routine for games. I rather just stay in that. Um, Also, little things matter. Like I was still on pace to play all 82 games, and so I wanted to check that off and was able to do that. So um, I think it depends on the situation, but I think if you asked most players, I think probably about 80% would say they'd rather play.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I have to think in negotiations too, it helps to be able to point to a couple of seasons where you're like, hey, I play all 82. So if you're signing me, you can bet that I'm a guy who's going to be available. Availability is an ability.
And on Dom too, like I think I looked it up because I think that was your first. I think you played the full 82 like I think 2 or 3 times in your career. Like, what is from a player perspective that perfect attendance record? Like, what does that stand? Because I think that's something that I think I'd love to get just the player perspective of what that 82 means when you look at the end of the year, and that means you were there for all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of pride in that. I mean, it's a lot goes into it. Um, the preparation, the discipline of taking care of your body, getting, on all facets, whether it's the nutrition or the fitness or recovery things that you're doing, managing your rest. Obviously, a lot of luck goes into it as well. But I think it's a source of pride given how difficult an NHL season is, how many ways to get injured there are, how unrelenting the schedule is. To play all 82 is certainly a feather in any player's cap.
I remember Tyler Seguin saying, I think this is probably close to 2 years ago now, that for him, he had gotten to the point in his career where he viewed playing 82 games as something more to be prouder of than scoring 30 goals. Like, kind of in a general sense, like if you can play 82 games, that's more impressive to him than hitting the 30 goal mark. Now, I'm sure there are some players where they'd say, I'd love to hit 30 goals. I don't care if I play 50.
Given his unfortunate, luck that he's had in his career, that makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah.
But if you can't stay healthy, you can't play. So I'm with him on the fact that what's more important than that.
Okay. The other one for me, the last one for me, how do you not just tell Jaromír Jágr stories all the time when you're on the broadcast? I feel like anyone who's played with Jágr has all these stories about either being odd or confused or slightly afraid and then impressed about what it was like playing with him. So could you give us one? Do you have one Jaromír Jágr story about what it was like playing with a player like that?
Yeah, I mean, as like you said, anyone that's played with him has dozens of stories. Trying to pick which one would be appropriate for
that's the challenge
audiences too. As well. I mean, some of the like training stuff. One thing I remember he told me, which was, Sean, you could probably look it up as I'm speaking, but when we played together 2005, he would have been, I don't know how old he would have been in that year, but I don't even know if he was maybe right around 30. And I remember being in the gym with him after a game, and we were on the bike working out, and he was talking about basically things that his dad had told him. And anyone who knows Jágr knows that, like, he's a mystic. Like he's one of these guys that just believes in, the supernatural, and I think we all do, or a lot of us do in some respect. But he had said that his dad told him that he wouldn't hit his prime until he was 45. And this was when he was 30. So the writing was already on the wall that he was going to play as long as he did, because he wasn't going to actually reach his greatest heights until the ripe age of 45. And you know what? My reaction was, he's got a smart dad. He just wants to set the expectation early that this is let him believe in that, and lo and behold, here we are.
Have that carrot way out there, and they'll go to meet it. Yeah.
He's got 6 games this season already back in Kladno right now this season. So he's still going at 50 at 54 right now. So 45 reversed. So I wanted to kind of a silly one maybe for our audience that they may, but I always enjoy some of the other hockey kind of tournaments outside the NHL world. And at the end of after your NHL career, I think you played about 14 or 15 games in Switzerland, and you played in something called the Spengler Cup. And it's actually got a little bit more love this year because they sent a college hockey team over there and they played in it too. And I wanted to kind of just give you a minute to just I want to know what it was like playing in Switzerland after playing in the NHL, and then B, what that tournament was like, because it's one I've watched on TV a couple times and watched a little more intriguing with some of the college guys this year, and it looked like just quite the atmosphere.
Yeah, so it was after my last season in Toronto. I was waiting around, see if a contract would come in the fall, and I was at a Hockey Night in Canada event with Curtis Joseph, and this was like early December, and Cujo had said, "Hey, you should look into the Spengler Cup." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought about that." He's like, "Yeah, towards the end of my career, I played in the Spengler. It was some of the most fun I ever had, one of the greatest experiences of my career." So I reached out to the folks I knew at Hockey Canada, and just said, "Hey, what's the story?" And the response was, "Listen, the tournament is like 2 weeks away. We've already picked the team. We wish we had known that you were available sooner, but the team is picked." And Ron Francis, who was the GM, called me back like a couple days after and said, "Listen, there's a small chance that we don't get one of the releases from one of the guys on the KHL team. If we can't get this release, you're on the team." So I waited another week, and like maybe 6 or 7 days before the tournament, Ronnie Francis called back and said, "You're on the team." So we're gonna book you a flight, and we'll see you in Switzerland. So get over there, expecting to just be there for 2 weeks. The Spengler Cup, as Cujo advertised, just an incredible event, like a mountain town in Switzerland, resort town, gentle snowflakes falling, the beautiful Swiss Alps, this incredible old arena with wood paneling on the inside, fans coming out in droves that are in beer gardens all day. Just incredible hospitality from the people in Switzerland. Hockey Canada treated us and invited all the families. So it was, over the holidays, it was amazing, a great experience. While I was there, first of all, I would recommend anyone who's looking for hockey trips to do, like it's a great trip. And I met some folks while I was there in a convenience store that had come from somewhere in Canada, and they were like, "This was on our bucket list. We're so glad we came and did this." So it's a great event. While I was there, I met Serge Aubin, who ex-NHL player who was coaching for the team in Zurich. And he basically asked if I'd be interested in joining the team for the rest of the season, the Swiss team. So I was planning on coming back and just seeing what opportunities might present themselves in the NHL. But at that point, I just talked to my wife, and we were like, "Let's do this." And it was some of the most fun I had in my whole career. The 4 months in Switzerland, a great experience living in Switzerland, experiencing a different culture, and a short time, but a great time overseas. Similar to what you hear about European soccer players that come over and play a few years at the end of their career in the MLS. I'm sure it's a very similar feel.
Well, Dom, I appreciate you letting me go down, because the Spengler Cup is on my list of things that I don't know how I could convince my wife to take a trip like that right around the holidays with everything, but it's always been on that list of I would love to take the Spengler Cup trip in my life. So I'm building up the backlog of story here so I can just use this as part of the presentation at some point. So you did a great job. Really appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate you helping us figure out audio issues as well too. Thank you for that. And I'm excited to I'll do my best to find the best possible way to make sure I watch the Utah broadcast of game 1 and 2, because I'm excited to see that market and kind of when playoff hockey comes to a town and everything. You know this as someone who's played in it. There's something special about it. So I'm excited about that for that franchise.
Awesome. Well, it's great. Pleasure joining you guys.
Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
All right. Cheers. Good luck to you guys.
Thank you.
All right, there he goes. Thanks to Dominic Moore for hopping on the show. I appreciate the Jágr story and all of the other untellable Jágr stories that are certainly out there. With Utah, I didn't at the time when Seattle made the playoffs in their second year in 2023. I remember talking to some friends because I had moved out of Seattle in 2019. So I just left there pretty lately. So I was a little bit jealous of all the folks there who got to see a second year, I guess, NHL club. But what it was like to hit the playoffs for the first time, and the atmosphere, like you're talking about, I'm sure in Utah will be every bit as crazy and fun and ridiculous as I heard it was in Seattle. It reminds me back when the Winnipeg 2.0 made the playoffs too, and they had the whiteout going and stuff too, how crazy that place was. A little bit of a smaller building too, so just the feel being really crazy. I hope that Utah, it's a little bit of a unique building. I think they're still doing some renovations and stuff on that building. So I always think that if you get a chance to watch a hockey game in a quirky place, whether it's in Switzerland around Christmas time, I mean, that would be an awesome trip for any hockey fan. Or going to Utah to watch a playoff game. I mean, that's got to be a bucket list item.
Yeah, and if we aren't a business, but if Spengler Cup is interested in hosting live episodes of Algorithmically Incorrect, we are available. We will be open to conversations of doing a live show from Davos. So I'm not opposed to that, Robert.
I'll reach out to the Spengler family and see about sorting that out.
I know Matty Stransky got to hoist the Spengler Cup this year as the captain, so that's always so there's a tie for deep history there.
Yeah, we'll have to ask his line mate Radek Faksa if he has any ins there. Can set up that Swiss chalet dream trip there. Man, him talking about the snow gently falling and everything. I'd imagine that couldn't have been the toughest decision in the world. No, what? We can go wait for a job in wherever in Columbus or something, or just hang out here and make some money and hang out in Switzerland for another year. Yeah.
You can tell he's got the storytelling part of the broadcasting thing down. He's done a good job with that. So, Robert, today was another fun episode. We've done this has been 3 of them, and the fact that we have continued to gain steam as opposed to peter out is a sign of success for me. So let's keep that going. And really, really, for me, it's been really fun and appreciative. We've seen a lot of people. If you're listening live or afterwards or whatever, it's been really cool to see the response on this. And so I just want to take a quick second before we go to say thank you to everyone who's been listening. This has been a really fun thing to build out. And it's, I hope it's been feeling kind of a niche for you if you're a listener of something fun that you probably break up the 2+ hours to listen to on various car rides. And I understand that it's an adjustment for me to think about doing a show this long, but I hope that I'm very appreciative for those listeners and viewers that have found time to put this into their day and everything.
Yeah, there's something really cool about doing whether you want to call it a passion project or whatever, about doing something that I talking to Steve earlier, like I'm soaking all that up. Like this is stuff that I need to learn more about if I'm going to write about goaltending. There's so much there that just there's a lot of ignorance, or at least I'm ignorant of. So I love having conversations like this and having a space where we can host those conversations and learn more ourselves. So checks a lot of boxes, both personally and hopefully for everyone watching and listening.
It's always all about learning. Very exciting. Well, hopefully we will learn more next week as well. Algorithmically Incorrect, episode 4 next week. Just like every Wednesday, I sign off not knowing what our guest will be. And we hopefully will have a couple good guests. At a minimum, Robert and I will be there. And I really appreciate you. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, y'all.